Greetings all. Welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree with myself, Got That Funk. To my that direction is Rob, Open Bobs, Agent of Doubt, and of course, Bionic Dance. How are y'all doing?
Been all right.
Awesome.
Glad to hear it. You guys please converse amongst yourselves while I sort my headphone problem out.
Okay.
He forgot to mention Buzz Lightyear.
You know, I seriously think that Buzz Lightyear should have like an evil clone named Buzz Nightmare.
Oh no, that's just a green jersey. My bad. It was just a really quick flash. I thought it was Buzz Lightyear.
Oh, you're talking about that little crotch monster there.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's making the rounds. He's doing laps today.
Well, I just finished playing about an hour of a VR sport, so I got my exercise.
Which sport?
It's called Spark. It's sort of a cross between dodgeball, racquetball, and it has a sort of Tron motif. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so there's a lot of ducking and dodging and weaving and throwing involved. It's very aerobic.
Do you have a wireless setup?
No, unfortunately not. But honestly, like some of the problems I've heard with the wireless setups is that not all the games are available for them.
Okay.
So.
Is the cable that you have connected to you cumbersome when you're doing all those moves?
Not when I'm playing Spark. The only thing that happens occasionally and very occasionally when I'm playing Spark is either I'll step on it or when I try to throw, my hand will get caught in the cable, which, like I said, happens almost never. But when it does happen, it's unpleasant. Other than that, no. But if I'm playing a game where I'm not necessarily always facing forward relative to my original position, like, say, Skyrim VR, then it starts to get in the way. Like if I have to turn around in the same direction multiple times, all of a sudden I'm mummied up in cable. So.
Yeah. Is there a league for it?
For Spark, very impromptu and irregular, but yes, there's a couple of Facebook groups where you can join various tournaments and things, but they don't happen as often as perhaps one might like.
Do you game under your YouTube username?
Yeah, I'm known almost everywhere under that name. Almost.
So if we wanted to go challenge you in Spark, we could find you pretty easily.
As long as I'm online, yeah.
Okay. Most of the games I play are really challengeable. But I do play under my YouTube username.
Gotcha. So, what else are folks up to?
Nada.
Nothing, really? Wow, am I seriously the most interesting person in the room at the moment?
Actually, the preliminary votes are counted. Actually, because of the write-in, it's going to take a couple days more to get the total. But as of right now, I won. So.
Oh, really? What was the position again?
It's that was the primary. So that was to get on the ballot in November and to become the Democrat nominee
for
county commissioner.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
what does a county commissioner do? Commish things?
Yeah, they commish on the county level.
Ah, excellent.
Will there be an independent candidate who wanted to be Democrat?
Don't know yet. Once the votes are certified, which won't be until I think the 23rd, I think. I guess he'll decide by then. So I'm hoping he doesn't run as an independent and he, comes on board my campaign. That's what I'm hoping. I want to try to run a unity ticket kind of a thing, a unifying campaign and bring everybody together. But we'll see.
Okay. Has he figured out that he can't run as a Democrat?
I don't know yet.
Wow.
Someone's enthusiastic over there.
He's got loads of energy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's well, today. Yeah, he's in rare form today.
You know, I'm not sure I know. What's his name?
Damon.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
So,
And what's your next son going to be named?
the new one? Kai. He's coming on
On the what?
the 18th of September.
Oh, okay.
18th of September. So, yeah, it's a C-section, so it's scheduled. So we already know his birthday.
Right.
And yeah, kids are awesome as long as you can give them back. You know, I mean, seriously, I think the main two reasons why I don't want to have kids: A, the cost, and two, poopy diapers.
That part only lasted a little while, though.
Long enough, believe me. Like the first diaper I ever changed, this kid did not drop a deuce. This kid crapped pea soup, and I will never change a diaper again.
Oh, that's quite funny. There's certain things that happen to people you swear you're never going to do, and then you become a parent and then you do them. And one of the things that you do that you swear you're never going to do is talk about your baby's poo. You swear you're never going to do it, and then see you didn't even have a baby, but you couldn't help yourself.
Well,
That's how
but
traumatic it is.
that's only because I'm saying why I don't want a kid, though. Like I can never mention it again as long as not having kids never comes up.
You know what? When it's your own kid, it's different.
Is it?
Yeah, you don't mind it as much. It's I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I've never gotten to that point with my cat's kitty litter. I can't imagine doing it with actual poo, like in a diaper.
I mean, I've changed diapers and cleaned up all kinds of poo and vomit and all kinds of stuff as a parent. And I don't know. You know, I mean, I've been around people that puke, and I want to puke. But I've cleaned up my kid's puke like it was nothing. It didn't even faze me. So it's a weird thing when it's your kid.
Well, this is what I look like when I take your word for it. I do not want children. Cats are enough responsibility.
Yeah, cats are fun as well. You know, cats have they have a certain presence. When I love having cats, but I can't have pets because I'm going to be traveling. So, you know, having a pet would be irresponsible.
That is one thing that I have to admit has bothered me is when this whole thing, if it's ever under control, the pandemic is under control, I really want to travel, but I also don't want to like neglect my cats. So, you know, I probably can't get away for more than a week at a time.
Yeah. I mean, cats at least are easier to give to a sympathetic friend or whatever. But, you know, if you have a dog, that's a whole different level of responsibility.
Well, I do have someone like the number of someone who looks after cats professionally, like that's her job. And so I do have someone who could take care of cats, but I don't want to be away for too long.
Sure. Hey, Michael, do you have any pets?
I have 2. 3 because one's staying with us for a while. But yeah, Border Collie and a rescued pit bull.
Cool. Border Collies are great. One of the smartest dogs I can think of, Border Collies. I think they're fantastic. Do they play Frisbee or catch or fetch or any of that stuff?
I taught the pit bull to sick nuts with a laser pointer.
Chopper, sick balls.
Yeah.
It's my 2 favorite dogs, pit bulls and border collies. They're awesome.
Yeah, Sugar will fetch a ball. She loves tennis balls.
Right. Phoenix Rider says she's got a couple of cats as well. I mean, like I say, I love cats. I feel like a house isn't really a home without a cat in it. But like I say, if I'm going to be traveling, there's just no point in getting anything. I can't even have a tarantula or a snake because I'm just going to be gone for too long, you know. Yeah. That's it. Kate mentioned a minute ago about, you know, when all this stuff is going to be over. And I kind of want to talk about it because we haven't really talked much for the past few weeks about the state of the pandemic and where everybody's at. And I've been noticing on the news a lot lately that Trump's been harping on about opening schools up in September. And whilst I can appreciate that, you know, people are sick and tired of being locked in and whatever, and they want to get a normal life back, it seems to me that in many, many states, the pandemic is worse now than it was in March when we locked down and closed down the schools before. So if it's
Yes.
worse now than it was then, how can they possibly even try to make the argument that it's okay to open schools now?
Well, that assumes that their argument will be rational and based on facts.
My bad.
Also, his wish to open the schools is basically, well, young people can handle it because their immune systems are strong and all that. It's kind of discounting the fact that most of the elementary school teachers are old.
Sure. And they're not even taking a lot of things into consideration. Like, are they going to stagger school so that you have like morning classes and afternoon classes? Are they going to do like half the classes come like, people have school every 2 days? It doesn't really matter how they stagger it or whatever, because from my point of view, say you've got 30 kids in your class and you're the teacher. At least one of those kids is going to be breathing out coronavirus just by statistical odds, 1 out of 30, right? And I can't get my head around how they think they're going to get 30 people in. Every teacher is going to end up getting ill, basically, because they're going to have multiple kids breathing on them who all have multiple humans breathing on them. You know what I mean? It's just like the school seems like a great big funnel for coronavirus to come into and then go back out of.
I'm getting the impression from some of the memes I've seen and stuff that a lot of teachers are rebelling against this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I hope so.
I mean, one of the arguments that was put forward for doing it was so the teachers can watch the kids so the parents can go back to work to get the economy going. And it's like, well, that just completely discounts what a teacher does completely. I mean, teachers aren't babysitters. It's not.
That's right.
They get paid for. So now you want to endanger everybody's kids, all of the teachers, so these people can go back to work, and then what? Their kids come home with coronavirus and kill great grandma. It's mind-numbing. It's just stupid.
My brother lives in a conservative county here in Colorado, and he got a flyer. They're a month out from this decision. They have the semester starts a month from now, but the flyer that he got, there was still a whole bunch of stuff still up in the air, and it was just emailed out to everyone. And what it looks like they're trying to do is make it a choice. Do you want your kid to go to school via Zoom, or do you want your kid to go in person? And they're just going to split the children up by the parents' selection. So if you want your kid to go to school normally in person, that's what they'll try to accommodate. But that in that way, they don't know how many teachers they're going to need. But then here's the thing. If one of those students gets sick with the coronavirus, it's like a two-week quarantine, right? That student then becomes an online student. So what if all of the students altogether get the coronavirus in the same month? Because it's something that spreads that way, right? Then all of the teachers are going to have to flip over to being, Zoom teachers, and then a month later they're going to have to try to go back to in-person curriculum for those students. And it's ridiculous, the hoops that they're going to have to make those teachers jump through.
It's an impossible juggle. There's no way they can juggle all that. I mean, like you just said, if the teacher gets ill, even if one student in the in-class gets ill, surely doesn't that mean that every other student in that classroom also has to quarantine?
Yes.
Right?
Everyone they came into contact with.
Okay, everybody grab a pen or a crayon or a pencil. Write this down. Okay? July
Okay.
11th, 2020. DevShell 2 agrees with Jurist 1.
Okay. Let me see. Is it Education is Broken? Is that the one, or is it the one before that?
Yes, Education is Broken. Yes.
Okay, I'll put it on screen just so we can all enjoy the wisdom of Curus. There we go. I thought I was going to write a formula down for some kind of secret potion that's going to make me rich.
I loved how you guys grabbed your. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, I just happened to be sitting at the desk, so yeah, it was grabbable. No, I think the whole thing about school, though, opening school, I honestly think it's just literally just to distract the news cycle, because no rational argument can be made at all, really, for opening school, because there's so many hurdles, and they're not willing to give the schools the funding to accomplish the things that they want the schools to accomplish. You know, like keeping students a sufficient distance apart can't be done in a classroom, because already, like say there's 28 kids in a class or whatever, there's no way they're all 6 feet apart. Those classrooms aren't that big.
The point behind Trump's strategy of reopening so that parents can get back to work is to restart the economy, right? With that strategy, we're not reopening for 4 or 5 years unless they come out with a vaccine. That's just the way it is. If he had locked down the whole country tighter, like watertight, like a duck's asshole, tight, like China times 10. If he just locked everyone down in their house, we would have been done with it in 2 to 3 weeks. And we would have had a restarted economy, and we would have lost 2 to 3 weeks of productivity, minus those people who found a way to be productive at home.
That's right. I mean, if you look at the way they've done it in different parts of the world, like Taiwan, I think has had a total of 6 deaths. 6, you know, just as an example.
Apparently, Vietnam has had 0.
There you go. I didn't know. I just want to bring in Aaron here. Aaron says, my 12-year-old girl is so terrified that she wants to be homeschooled in the fall. I'm sure that's where my kid, if I had kids school age, I'm pretty sure that's where their head would be at as well.
It's where I would be. I would refuse.
Yeah. Because my whole thing, my whole thing is twofold. I mean, I don't, not only would I not want my kid to get coronavirus or bring it home, but I just wouldn't want anybody else. I don't want to get coronavirus, not just because I don't want to get ill. I also don't want to get anyone else ill, because if I got ill and then was locked down, just by not getting anyone else ill, I've saved hundreds of lives. You know what I mean? Like literally, if you stop the virus and don't spread it, you've saved this big chain of, you know, because it keeps going, because it multiplies. If it's unchecked, it multiplies 3 by 3. So in 10 steps, that's 59,000 people. So, and if only 1% of those people die, that's 590 people that you killed by letting it transmit. So if you get it and lock down, you're saving lives. That's the way I look at it. So,
but that's the one thing they refuse to do. That's the one thing they won't do is lock down, wear a mask, wait it out, done. They insist that they can't do that they're not willing to do that it's somehow a plot or whatever to oppress someone. I mean, I'm trying to come up with a way to steel man their reasons as best I can, but they're so stupid, it's impossible.
I will give them that a horrible economy will reflect bad on the president. But the intent of everyone who wants to deal with the virus is not to get rid of Donald Trump by dealing with the virus. Their intent is, let's save some lives.
It's amazing to me how Trump. Sorry.
Saving lives is a lie. That's not what it's going to do. They just want to shackle you somehow. I mean, that's what they're always saying, is that like the disease is a hoax, and masks don't do anything, and it's just like I've even seen memes that saying they're one step away from forcing us to wear burqas. Like, I'm not even kidding. That meme is out there, and it just, how do you deal with people who have that mindset that somehow masks are a conspiracy? I don't get it. What do you do?
My brother.
You sterilize those people in the interest of evolution.
Well, don't tempt me.
My brother is one of them. My brother believes that it's all a conspiracy set up by corporate America. That COVID is a hoax. And that the name of the virus, COVID, means.
Oh, cheapers.
He's at this whole thing about how it means, something vaccine ID number 19, and it all ties into 5G and vaccines and microchips and the number of the beast and this entirely insane, wacky. I cut him out of my life today. I told him that. I'm done. And because he keeps sending me these crazy videos, I said, I'm done. I mean, I'm done. I'm finished. I blocked him on Facebook, and that's it. You're no longer a part of my life. He keeps like, going to my parents and stuff for events, and he doesn't do any social distancing when he's at home because he doesn't believe any of it's true. My dad is 75 years old with lung problems. And I told him, I said, you're going to, get your father sick, and then 2 weeks later, he'll be dead. What are you going to do? Is it a hoax then? You dumbass. But
Yeah, I mean, okay, granted, nobody who I know personally has had COVID except for my grandmother, and she did die of it, but she was 98. We hadn't seen each other in ages. She wasn't long for this world, so it's hard to feel it as too much of a loss, but it's still a loss.
Of course.
But even as someone who has not been as personally affected as other people, I still see the importance of dealing with it seriously and scientifically and all that stuff. But then you've got all these other people where it's like, oh, well, like I've lost 3 friends and 2 relatives, but it's still a hoax. And it's like, how do you deal with that?
my ex-boyfriend's mother died of COVID. And I loved her to death. I mean, she was like a second mom to me. And so when my brother was coming at me on Facebook, on the messenger on Facebook, telling me how much of a hoax it is, I was just like, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. I mean, it's just absolute fucking nonsense, And what do you do with people like that? Nothing, because they're not going to listen, because they're anti-science, because they're anti-intellectual. I mean, it's just whatever, dude. You're
this whole trend towards anti-science has really picked up an awful lot of momentum over the past 10 years. I mean, there's always been a little bit of religious drag against it, but now it seems to have gone past the whole I don't believe in evolution bullshit and I think the earth is flat bullshit and all that. It's gone way past that. I mean, it's like they don't want to believe doctors now. It's not just that,
all the doctors are lying to you because they're getting paid. All the scientists are lying to you because they're getting paid.
All college professors are evil liberals that are trying to indoctrinate your children.
It's being funded by the Bilderbergs and George Soros. It's the Democrats are using this in order to gain power, and they don't care how many people they kill doing it. It's actually something exactly what my brother said. One of the things he said. So, and then when he saw that I got enough votes to be on the ballot, he said, "Congratulations for getting on the ballot for freeloader." That's like, you're such a piece of shit, dude.
I mean, imagine if we could have a conspiracy like that was so overreaching with nobody leaking that it had happened and all of that. I mean, imagine living in a world where you think that's possible, that you could have that much of a conspiracy, that every scientist is signed on to it, that there weren't any whistleblowers saying, I was approached by the Illuminati, right? And I'm telling you this, which means that they're going to kill me next week because they'll know I told you. They'll probably kill you too, so don't tell anyone I told you. But there's this guy, he came up to me and said, hey, you know what? We're trying to put out this vaccine for corona that's going to have a microchip in it, and it will be able to track every move someone makes. Now, remember, they'll kill you if they know you know this. I mean, imagine the level of control and guile people would have to make that a reality. I can't believe anyone believes this.
On that point of the level of control, so I'm telling one of my girlfriend's stories here. Misty had a best friend that had 2 children with autism that refused to vaccinate her children anymore because she thought that the vaccines caused her children to have autism. Mm-hmm. And when Misty told her that was just junk science and it wasn't true, she said, well, they get all the doctors in on the conspiracy. And they get all the psychiatrists, all the social workers and all that. And so Misty said, well, I'm a social worker and I've never heard anything about this. And she said, well, you haven't gotten high up enough on the chain of command in order to be indoctrinated into it.
That's insane.
It's like, okay, or a world transition into global communism, right? So there's all those different conspiracy theories. There's what Cura said, but all anybody is asking you to do is wear a fucking mask.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's what I said to my brother, and he said, that's where it starts. No, dumbass, that's where it ends. That's where it ends. You wear a mask so we can put this behind us, like other countries have done. If what everyone is, all these people, if what they're saying is true, why did Japan pull out of this? Why is Vietnam doing okay? Why are all these other countries that got it under control way before we did, as if we have under control, but you know, much earlier than we even began to? Well, are they not part of the global conspiracy? Do they not count?
Well, all of our deaths that we've had are fake news, obviously.
In defense of Rob's brother's sensibilities about this, I will say that he did have to endure a brother who wouldn't put a T-shirt on to cover up his own boobs at the family picnic. So, you know, I understand he's a little sensitive about, you know, coverings and all that.
You know, he called me princess the other day. I was like, oh, fuck you.
How you doing, Joe?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
What's up?
Oh, not too much.
Okay, quickly, be more interesting.
Well, how am I going to start? Why would I start now?
I don't know. I just figured I'd say it because it was funny.
Well, yeah,
It worked on me.
I thought my response was funny. I guess I failed at that too.
Oh man, I mean, just all of these weird conspiracy. Like sometimes I wonder if the people who are into conspiracy theories and the people who like religion and the people who go after like paranormal creatures or something, if they just wish the world was cooler than it really is, not nearly as mundane. Because I went through that. I mean, I was an 80s kid, still am. I was raised in an era when E.T., Close Encounters, Star Wars, Flight of the Navigator, all of that stuff was new. I thought for sure that by the year 2000, we'd be living like the Jetsons and we'd be hanging out with alien friends and have pet robots and all this shit, you know, and how cool would that world have been? Now, and there are times when I wish for that feeling again, when I felt like the world could be a magical place. And I know it can't be because I've absorbed too much science. But what I wonder is if these people, these conspiracy theorists and religion nuts, if that's really what they're doing, is wishing for a more magical world and that's it. Like they're playing pretend and don't realize it.
Well, yes, but in a very negative way, though. See, that's the thing, Kate. So you had a positive view of like, hey, we can do all this amazing, cool stuff, and obviously you still have a desire at least to do whatever's possible. But I find that the people who tend to believe in a lot of this stuff, they see the world as a very scary place that they don't understand. And it's like I've mentioned before about the people, like if you think about the militia guys, that these right-wing guys are out in the middle of nowhere with their compounds and their arsenals. They, because I thought about it. I realized years ago when the Freemen out in Montana were doing their crap, because it's a psychological thing. It's a defense mechanism, really. Because which would you rather believe? That you're just some ineffective, unimportant individual with no prospects for the future, or you're a freedom fighter who's fighting against a government that's been co-opted and taken away from you, by these outside forces, by all the mud people and all this kind of crap. It's a way to kind of build yourself up. So you're the hero. There's like these conspiracy people. They all think they've got the secret Batman decoder ring, they're the real knowledge, and the rest of us are all just the sheep out there. But they see it, they know. They live in a very dark place that they're the hero of that place. So in a way, like you pictured yourself as the hero of a very positive world, but they see themselves as a hero in a very negative world.
Well, I can split the difference. I mean, what if I managed to sneak my ass into Area 51 and find those UFOs? The government was being nefarious, and I, being the heroic one, managed to get into the UFO and fly it away. How cool would that be? But at the same time, I'm still that underdog that they all picture themselves being,
Oh yeah, well they probably believe in Area 51 also, or it's weird, especially the ones that are like, there's not that many, but there's a few flat earthers who are also like UFO conspirators. Like, how does that work?
Well, and by the way, just to clarify, because people out there are probably going to take that clip and misconstrue it, I don't think there's UFOs in Area 51. It's a fantasy, okay?
I just have to say, pertaining to what Joe was saying about people who are conspiracy theorists, I mean, I myself am prone to speculating along those sorts of lines, I have to say. And there are certain things that I have in common with the people that are more nutty than me, because I fit a lot of the criteria that Joe just listed, except I don't go over the edge and think I can save the world. Or, but there is a certain thing. It's like I used to have a gambling problem. And it's a very similar kind of mentality. It's a very similar part of your mind that it's affected, where you think that you can beat the odds. You think you're smarter than fill in the blank, you know. And I think that's part of it. And also for me, I mean, you just look back at history and you find out that, you know, there's plenty of instances where we've been lied to in history. And then you find out later on that, you know, what the truth actually is. And you're like, okay, well, that must be happening now as well. You know, how much false narrative is being planted now? You know, like in the book 1984, you know, the protagonist of the book, his job was to go and change history. He was just to go back to the newspapers and change the stories so that they fit the modern narrative, right? And I made the mistake. The other thing I was going to say about people like me and other conspiracy theorists is we have an unnaturally high suspicion of authority, higher than the average person. And for me personally, that comes from two things. Number one, I grew up in a very sort of authoritarian house. Very sort of militaristic in its discipline. And number two, I read 1984 when I was 10 years old. And it totally affected my brain because I really thought for years afterward that it really was a big brother and we really were all being watched and that, you know, blah, blah, blah. I had that mindset until I was probably in my 20s before I realized I'd made that up in my head, you know.
Ironic thing now is we are all being watched.
Yeah.
Everything online. I mean, they know everything, and there's so many cameras around. They know most of your movements. With your cell phone in your pocket, they can track you anywhere you go. So, I mean, there is a certain amount of that is actually real today. There is cause for concern about our privacy and our individual liberties, and there absolutely is cause for concern.
Absolutely.
I do not think, though, that there's this overarching, organization. This cabal of
the Illuminati.
That's all bullshit. But yes, there are different entities that are some related, some unrelated, that are tracking certain things about you, pretty much at all times for their own reasons. So yeah, there's a certain amount of reason, to be concerned. But yeah,
see, the funny thing about it is that. Here's the kind of the irony of the situation where you're at, Paul, is that the funny thing is, like, conspiracy in a broad sense, conspiracy people are not wrong. They basically what it comes. The thing is that their machinations in their head, though, a lot of them are way more convoluted than reality, and that's, I guess, the bizarre part. To me, what it really comes down to is people with power, money, and influence use their power, money, and influence to maintain and grow their power, money, and influence. It's not a secret. They kind of do it out in the open. The only difference is they are good. They've always been good at using divisions among us to basically solidify their position. Divide and conquer. It's like, and that's the thing, it's very easy and very old. And so, hey, let's get poor white people and racial minorities at each other's throats and blaming each other for what's going on. Well, and George Carlin is saying, well, the rich, go all the way to the bank. It's not new. So, like, as I said, a few weeks back, when Sandy happened, at this point I was already not a big conspiracy person, but that's when I realized that all the wacky, out over the top, complicated things that conspiracy people believe, I knew they couldn't possibly be true, because I realized if things were that sinister, if there was that much work, if the people on top were that organized, they literally, all they would have to do is shut off the power and water, and we would be at their mercy very easily. They don't need to have all these, crazy, plans. And the other thing is that you don't have to have a conspiracy, an organized conspiracy, when you have common purpose. So you look at in the airline industry, you look at a lot of different industries, there's no longer any competition, even if there's more than one player, because they realize they don't have to. Rather than fight one another to gain advantage, like basically cutting their own profits to kind of cut the other guy. If they all add that fee, then they all get it. So you think about, like in banking, that's one of the big ones. They realized in the late 90s that, hey, you know what? Once it was cleared that they could charge whatever fees they wanted for like foreign ATM and stuff. Hey, you know what? Instead of competing and like having to say, okay, our bank charges less than the other bank's fees. If we all raise the fees when somebody else does, we all make money, and then there's then it becomes a non-issue. If everybody charges $5, where are you going to go? You have no choice.
I thought price fixing was illegal.
Well, it is if you do it. If I'm Bank A and I call Bank B and say, hey, let's set the price to $5, that's illegal. But if Bank A charges $5 and Bank B goes, hey, they just raised their thing, instead of competing with them, we'll raise our fee and we'll all make money. That's perfectly legal.
Problem is, you got to get enough banks to go along with you. Otherwise, there'll be one that decides, I'll cut my prices and everyone will come to me because my prices are lower.
Yeah, that used to happen, Kate, but it doesn't anymore because they all realized because the example was the airline industry where they kept doing that and they actually started driving themselves out of business. And even the ones that were winning the argument were still losing money. So they realized, hey, wait a minute, we're much better off. And airlines were really kind of the first ones to do it, and then the banking industry, and then the phone industry, and now they all do it. And so they don't have to call one another. They know. They just watch what's going on.
But I mean, if just one of them said, we're willing to accept lower profits, but still net profits, they could just hover there and probably still clean up.
They could.
To that point, in the 90s, the banks in the UK started to charge nominal fee if you use your bank card in a bank's ATM that wasn't your own bank.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the banks decided to do it at the same time. Some were charging £1, some were charging $1.50, some were charging $1.99. And then I think it was my bank, the NatWest, who said, you know what, we're not going to charge, no matter what bank you're from, we're not going to charge on our machines. And because they cut everybody else out and said, we're never going to charge, all the other banks had to cut their fees, and now it's free no matter where you go,
and that's
no matter what bank you use.
And that's like cell phones too. I mean, when they were charging for texts, for example, which is why Twitter even exists in the first place, a bunch of them said free texting, unlimited minutes, flat fee, and look at where we are now.
Right.
It's monopoly by non-spoken agreement.
Right. Now, see, the thing is, though, if you look at the price structure, yeah, you get unlimited, but basically what they've done is they kind of they realized it was easier for them instead of having, because it costs money to track. So what they did was they raised everybody's rates and then gave you free stuff. So it's like, it's because it's psychological, like, oh, I'm getting something for free. No, you're not. You're paying for it. It's just buried. And now if you don't use a lot of text, so the people who don't use much in the way of text are paying for the people who do.
I want to jump in for a second and steer it back to where we started, because this we got onto this from conspiracy theories, and I kind of want to get back to the whole conspiracy theory thing, because I've personally noticed that there's some conspiracy theories that no matter how like open-minded I try to be, I just think are totally wacky. And then there's obviously some that I'm more sympathetic to. I don't necessarily say I buy into all of any of the conspiracy theories I've heard, except for JFK. I know it was a murder. I know it was a conspiracy. Having said that, so what I want to do, and I first want to ask all the people who are on the audience there who are texting away on the comment section, and then I want to go to, after I go to the host, we'll talk about what they comment. Okay, we'll bring the audience in this one as well. So first of all, what's the conspiracy theory that you're least sympathetic to, and what's the conspiracy theory that you're most sympathetic to? And we'll start with Michael, because you haven't spoken for a while.
The one that I'm least sympathetic to, probably anti-vaxxers, because it, by extension, virus deniers of COVID-19, but basically not being willing to get on the same page with actual science means that all of us are threatened. The answer is right in front of us, and half of the people can't get with it, and so we all are threatened. We all lose our grandmothers. We can't all have an economy that works right now. We have to be living in fear for the next 5 years because some people deny the science. And COVID-19 will lead into the anti-vax fears as soon as that vaccine is produced. The one that I'm most sympathetic towards, and I would want Joe to chime in on this one, is I do think that we're being tracked on our cell phones. And I think of this from an engineering standpoint. In the last few years, the ability to open your phone and take the battery out has been engineered out of phones. Right?
Mine doesn't do it.
So if you wanted to, say, commit a crime, but you didn't want to be tracked by your cell phone, you might have the thought to turn it off. Right? But if it was still running on battery power on some backdoor, still powered on because the battery is connected thing that was still tracking your whereabouts and maybe still even listening to you, maybe still even turning the camera on, you wouldn't be turning that off if you just turned off the power button. So you might think, well, I'll take the battery out of my phone, and then all of those processes might be disabled. So what they did was they engineered there you go. We've got the same phone, right? Yeah.
Mine still has a removable battery.
What brands are those that you guys are holding up?
Some Moto.
Yeah.
That's a Samsung SE10.
Okay.
Moto X.
Moto piece of shit.
Yeah, I got the Samsung S9.
So basically, you can't be not tracked by and still have your cell phone on you now because the battery is in there. And you can't fully turn off your phone if it has charge on the battery. And so I think that the way that this happened with all brands, even foreign brands, speaks to what Joe talked about as far as common interest. If they all do it all at the same time, you just won't be able to buy a new phone with the ability to take the battery out. And who knows about the architecture of these phones on the inside enough to be able to tell if there are backdoor ghost systems that are still using power when the phone appears to be off. Who knows enough to be able to, study their own phone when everything is so small these days? Even if you knew anything about electronics, you cannot really tell what's going on by just looking at the boards inside of it. Some of them are sealed in an epoxy where if you were to scrape away at it, you would destroy your phone. So there's no real way for you to study what's going on inside your phone.
Those are good choices. Anybody else want to jump in?
Okay, sure. But I would like some clarification first. When you say sympathetic, do you mean most likely to potentially at least a little bit agree with, maybe?
Kind of. That's what I mean. You don't necessarily buy into the whole thing, but you think, well, maybe. And the same, least sympathetic means you'd have to either ply me with alcohol or give me $1 billion to believe that, because that kind of thing.
So we are discussing believability rather than I kind of wish this was true. Because my answer would change based on, okay. Well, the one to which I think I'm least sympathetic has to be like flat earthers and faking the moon landing and all of that. Mostly because I've never been able to get a straight answer out of someone who believes that stuff. Why is that a conspiracy? Like, who gains what out of calling a flat earth a globe? I just, we faked the moon landing, what? To have propaganda against the Russians or something? I've never understood what the goal was of making that stuff up. Right. So that's the one where I'm least sympathetic. Most sympathetic, again, I'm sorry, I got to go with UFOs just because that'd be fucking cool if it was real. I've spent my entire life wanting to meet little green men. And if that turned out to be true, I would be beside myself. That would be the awesomest thing in the world. So, that's about as benign a conspiracy as you can get. And that's probably part of why I am sympathetic toward it. I don't know.
That's cool. I wish there were aliens too. I wish they came to Earth too, but I can't imagine that some what's the word, interstellar travel as possible. I would be more open to some science fiction kind of opening dimension to another dimension kind of thing than I would be open to the idea of traversing across the stars in a single lifetime. I don't think it can be done.
One thing that's kind of funny, I'm adopted. And one thing that's fairly common among adoptees is fantasies about who your birth parents are. Now, you might think that the biggest fantasy would be that your parents were deposed royalty and someday they'll come to take you back to rule the kingdom, right? But there was a study done that said the vast majority of adoptees who have these fantasies figure their parents were space aliens. And you know what? Guilty. I mean, hell, I don't know if you've ever seen the tattoo on my back, but there's a reason it's there.
Rob?
It's been a long time since I've seen that tattoo. I don't even remember it. Really, what is it?
You know those aliens that go around abducting and probing people?
Yeah, oh yeah.
A
Gray alien.
stylized image of their head.
Okay.
The truth is back there.
Right?
So for me, for least, I don't know if I can pick one. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of them just belong in the same bucket of crazy. You know, anti-vaxxers, New World Order, many times they're the same people. So I don't know, you know, New World Order and the Bilderbergs, that drives me nuts. There you go.
Yeah.
And the most sympathetic, I'm gonna go with. Wow, there's a couple for that too. That's hard. I tend to believe that I was gonna say Area 51, but I'm gonna go further and just say, like, the military knows things and they are capable of things that they would prefer us not know about. And I don't mean just, oh, look, we have these cool weapons we're keeping secret. I mean something more than that. When I was stationed in Aberdeen, Maryland, I had a road cleanup, and I was with another guy. We were a couple of privates, and our duty for the day was cleaning shit up on the road. And he ran out into the field to take a piss, and then he yelled to me to come here, come here, come here. So I ran out there, and there was a field of wildflowers. And in the middle of the field, there was a sign that said radioactive flowers. And I was like, dude, seriously, you brought me here? You know, but yeah. Why is there a field of radioactive wildflowers on a military base? I don't know. There's something going on there. And Aberdeen is close to Fort Meade, where they do a lot of genetic experiments and stuff. So, yeah. So Area 51 and the military knows things and does things and keeps us all in the dark. Yeah, that's one that I have some sympathy for. That's one I can believe in.
For me, it's funny because Michael kind of changed my mind a little bit because, yeah, I mean, like Rob said, there's a whole bucket of ones that are like really dumb. And I mean, the flat earther one, I think, is the dumbest one because, again, there's literally like, okay, the anti-vaxxer, I think they're literally a plague on the earth of the anti-vaxxers themselves. I think they're the most harmful. But at least I get it. Like I understand the motivation as to why they think something's going on. And they're wrong, but I get the whole concept. Like, hey, I'm protecting my child and blah blah blah. But the flat Earth is the fucking dumbest because there's literally no advantage whatsoever. In fact, I've asked people, and the most common answer I get has something to do with like that would convince people there was no God. I'm like, well, first off, if there is a God can make a globe. Since everything else we can see is a freaking globe, why would this be any different? And two, considering that all the major religions on Earth are also totally fine with the idea that we live on a globe. So if it was an anti-God thing, then wouldn't the religions that will be out there saying, hey, no, they're lying to you, and we're really on a disc because God said we're on a disc? So that one just doesn't make any sense. And I guess what I was originally going to say was the 9/11 truth for people because, like, I hated the Bush administration. I mean, in fact, prior to the Trump administration, I had hated the Bush administration more than any other government I've ever hated that I had to live under in my life. And so I was completely prepared to believe that that was real. So I spent a lot of time looking into it because I didn't put it past, the Project for a New American Century and all those assholes to really be up for something like that. So I scoured everything I could and I looked into it. And so here I was coming from a position where I was kind of tilted in favor of believing it. So I wanted to believe it. And even after looking at all the information, I was like, nope, not real. And then when I started trying to deal with some of these people and the ridiculous stuff, like I remember having this argument with somebody on like a baseball forum of all places, and this guy, he tells me he's like a college chemistry teacher, and he tells me this bullshit, like totally unscientific thing, and I'm like, well, you need to quit. Somebody needs to fire your ass if you teach chemistry and you believe what you just told me. Now, as far as most favorable toward, DPR Jones asked me this years ago, and I got mad at him because he asked me the question, and again, I didn't say I necessarily believed it was true, but the one I was most open to, and then he started ragging on me for it, and I was like, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't prepared for an intellectual discussion as to why I didn't totally dismiss it, but it's the same one as you, Paul. It's Kennedy assassination, and really what comes down to two things. One, in the 1979 House Committee on Assassinations actually concluded that it was a conspiracy. So we're talking, the government actually said, yeah, we think, evidence is there that says that there was at least somebody else involved. It doesn't mean it was the Nazi, the mafia. It doesn't mean it was Russia or anything like that. Could have been two dudes makes it a conspiracy. But the thing that got me about it was I started digging into it, and it's the shot that came through Kennedy's neck. So I was reading, it described the trajectory of the bullet and what angle that it struck Kennedy and went through his body. And so I did the geometry out, and based on the geometry, in order for the bullet to go pass through his body at the angle that it did, he would have to be leaning forward at a particular angle. And I don't remember the angle off the top of my head. So if he was leaning forward at that angle, then perfectly plausible. But in the picture that you see, it doesn't look like he is. But the problem is the angle you're looking at. Yeah, because the angle that he's your vantage point is as such that you can't entirely tell. Like, it is implied that the angle is really too shallow. But again, unless you had a really good view, it could be. So it's to the point where I could go either way on it, and it comes right down to it. If that angle is off, that means it could not have come from the upper window. Would have had to come from a lower vantage point. In which case, then that means second shooter conspiracy. Doesn't have to mean any of the other stuff people have posited about it, but it would mean there had to be a second shooter.
Based on the facts that there's enough room to say, yeah, this could be.
Right.
That's pretty much where I came to. About 10 years ago, when I first started my YouTube channel, I was randomly going through YouTube videos, and up on the recommended side, there was some footage from Dealey Plaza that wasn't the Zapruder film, but was a different set. And so I started watching some of these clips that were available on YouTube. Now, on the back of the car that Jackie Onassis and Kennedy were in, there were two Secret Service agents. They had a bar to stand on that was underneath the bumper, and handlebars over the rear of the car to stand there, to stand up behind Jackie Onassis and Kennedy. So from behind, you couldn't shoot them. And there was a clip. I don't know if it's still on YouTube. I haven't looked for 10 years, but there was a clip where you see these two Secret Service guys get a message in their earpiece, and right before the car turns to go around the U-turn at Dealey Plaza, they jump off their bars. They get out of the way, and then they follow on foot. Why were they off those bars? And there's another clip that's also shot from the opposite side of Dealey Plaza that happens that you don't actually see Kennedy get shot, but you can see what happens when he gets shot. And virtually every single person that was standing over there on that side, all their heads, all of them, turned to the grassy knoll to look where the bullets were coming from. And they were right there. They were right there. Now I know that the excuse has been, oh, they heard echoes or some shit like. No, they were right fucking there. If a gun goes off behind your head, you know where it came from. You know what I mean? You're gonna hit. I personally would have hit the deck, but yeah. So I'm very sympathetic to the point where I'm sure that they're lying to us about it.
All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get a time machine and invent the cell phone like a decade or two before Kennedy is shot. And then we will have it from every damn angle because everyone and their hamster will be filming it, from the crowd. But also, like, I'm going to make it so no phone can film in portrait mode. That you can only take pictures in portrait mode. You can only film in landscape, you fuckers. Turn your phone. But regardless, we will have footage of Kennedy's assassination from every conceivable angle.
Right.
If everyone has a cell phone.
I wish you had a time machine now. Okay, that sounds like a good mission. And my least favorite conspiracy theory, I mean, obviously the flat earther one should be the Trump of all Trumps, really. I mean, that Trump's all dumb shit, really. But for me, it's the chemtrails one. They think they've been poisoning the air for decades now with these chemtrails and whatever. And the reason I think that's just the stupidest conspiracy in the world is because whoever these elite people are who are putting the poison in the air have to breathe the fucking air we breathe.
Right.
You know? So it just falls flat on its face. Now I want to turn to the audience in the comment section, and I'm going to start with Curious because Curious thinks everything is a conspiracy. So Curious, what conspiracy theory, Curious, do you think is the most believable, and what is the least believable?
While he's skeptical, I just want to reply to what you just said. As a chemical engineer, if I was going to basically try to infect people with some sort of chemical, dropping it from airlines would be the least efficient way I could think of, because it's not like the stuff just falls straight down. Plus the fact that you have chemtrails in the middle of fucking nowhere, like over mountains and shit. So it would be an incredibly inefficient delivery system. You'd be better off putting stuff in the petrol, the gasoline. So as people drive, or you put it in the water. Again, people, it's going to get in everything. So there's so many better delivery systems than dropping shit from the air.
If you're dropping a liquid at 35,000 feet, it's going to freeze at about 30,000 feet and stay up there forever. It'll take years to come down.
And my favorite is when they're like, water vapor can't stay up there like that as clouds go by. Clouds are.
I wanted to say too that while Curious is typing while he's trying to figure out his answers, there's one. One of the videos that my brother sent me the other day was the guy was saying that chemtrails, well, not chemtrails, he was saying coronavirus and the vaccines, the point of them is to put nanobots inside of you, so the nanobots can trace your movements and read your brain waves. And I said, holy shit, 10 years ago, I made an Earl the Redneck video, where Earl said the same exact thing, but with chemtrails. That Earl was saying that he walks around with an umbrella because umbrella technology can defeat nanobots.
I remember Earl.
And I said to my brother, this guy, I should file a DMCA claim against this guy's video because he stole all my material.
Plagiarism. Yeah, so Curious says, let's go here. We got he's most sympathetic to the idea of global communism and least sympathetic to 9/11 truthers, which is kind of funny because aren't those the same people? Oh, yeah, I remember Edward Current. Oops. Aren't those the same people? The 9/11 truthers, don't they also believe in a one world government and the ultimate, communist takeover and loss of liberty and all that kind of thing? Aren't they the same people?
Yeah, that's mostly the same people.
I mean, I'm sympathetic to certain things about 9/11 being fishy, but I wouldn't call myself a truther. I think they're lying to us. So in that sense, I think I'm a truther. But there's so many different conspiracies about 9/11. I don't buy into even half of them, But certain things, I'm just like, yeah, that doesn't add up, But that's just me.
There's so many times when it seems to me like it's easier to think people were idiots than evil.
That's what they're hoping for.
Well, okay, but if it turns out that I'm correct about that, how do you tell the difference?
That's a perfectly rational question.
There's a certain conspiracy theory about Jeffrey Epstein that
Mm.
he was himself a government agent, part of a program in order to get blackmail on all sorts of foreign diplomats.
This is a QAnon one, right?
Well, yeah, but you don't have to be a QAnon conspiracy theorist just to see that he could be part of such a program. And there is a history in the U.S. of programs like that existing, right? So I watched this Jeffrey Epstein Netflix show, and not once did they go anywhere close to that conspiracy. And I was like, they are staying very, very far away from this, like to an odd extent. You know, they talked about the conspiracy theories about how he died and how people didn't believe that it was a suicide, but they would not talk about how people were believing that he might have been a government agent, and that's why he had so many government officials on his planes. You know, and some of them maybe weren't using his services as far as having sex with young women. Maybe they were just getting the blackmail in order to, affect public policy.
Or
they're looking for campaign donations.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it right there, Rob. But I also think what you were just saying. I think when you get the reputation that Jeffrey Epstein had for the length of time that he had it, associating with him at all puts you in the scope for blackmail. You know, I mean, just visiting his yacht or his private island, whether or not there was any hanky-panky, opens you up to all kinds of, suspicion because he had that reputation for the whole, sex trafficking and having dirt on people and everything like that. I mean, that's how he sort of, and as far as like, I personally don't think that speculation to say that it wasn't really a suicide when it comes to Epstein, I don't really even think of that as being a conspiracy theory, because just because you don't believe the official story, I don't think that necessarily qualifies as, because that they're clearly lying. I mean, come on. They lost the tape. The guards were gone. The suicide sheets didn't work because those sheets are paper. They're not supposed to hold a human body's weight. There's not supposed to be anything to tie yourself to up high in those rooms. They're supposed to be suicide-proof rooms. You know what I mean? The whole thing stinks to high heaven to me, and I just can't believe the official story.
Well, there is one conspiracy that actually I've not heard anyone put forward before, but if someone did, it would make me go, huh, which is if someone was invited onto his boat without being told that there was this underage harem going on, and then they had their picture taken, and people said, look, you fall in line or we'll show this picture to people saying you were on this sex boat. Like I could almost see that kind of conspiracy going on. Yeah. Mind you, no one else has said it. And when I thought it up, I thought this would make a great idea for a bad novel. Or hell, like you ever see the movie Taken?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I could picture someone blackmailing people with photos of them not doing anything wrong, but with the wrong people. I could totally see it.
Now, Paul, the one thing I felt with Epstein, and I kind of, I don't know, maybe I split the baby, I don't know. My feeling isn't that he was murdered, but what I do think is that people suspected he was going to commit suicide. It looked pretty obvious, and that it's kind of like a Pearl Harbor thing, or for that matter, as some people said, 9/11. Like, okay, we didn't do it, but we knew it was going to happen, and we created a situation where we allowed it to happen. So, like a lot of people feel, and I'm one of them, that, and I've heard refutations of this, and I don't buy it, that President Roosevelt knew the Japanese attack was coming. We had evidence it was coming, so the aircraft carriers were shipped out the day before, and they're on maneuvers, and they just happen to not be in Pearl Harbor when they should have been, and they don't get blown away.
Wasn't something like that done before, though, in England? Like Churchill or someone said, I have to sacrifice this village and let the Germans take it so that we
Yeah, that was Coventry.
Coventry, yeah.
Yeah, so basically the Brits knew they had cracked the Enigma code. They knew that that Coventry was going to get bombed, but if he did something to defend it, then the Germans would know that their code was broken, and so he basically had to sacrifice Coventry so the secret wasn't given up. In fact, yeah, it's mentioned in one of the an episode of Babylon 5. But and the same thing, like, you know, with when I was looking into the whole 9/11 conspiracy, you know, I came to the conclusion and know the Bush administration and their surrogates did not, you know, it wasn't a plan to didn't make it. However, there was plenty enough evidence to suggest that they may have known it was going to happen and allowed it to happen, because then it allowed the Project for New American Century to be put forward. In fact, that was the whole premise of Project for New American Century, is like, hey, you know, if there's some big catastrophic horrible thing that happens, we can use that as the pretext to roll out all this right-wing bullshit. And then, you know, then they see, oh, hey, you know, that's going to happen. All right, we just step back. We don't actually make it happen, but if it happens on our watch, you know, it's beneficial.
One thing I'll say about Paul not being a gambler anymore, it's a very good thing right now, because now that Ghislaine Maxwell is in custody, there are betting lines as to whether it's going to be COVID or if it's going to be suicided, and how long it's going to take. There's actual betting lines on that.
That
online.
doesn't shock me at all.
Doesn't shock me at all.
That doesn't shock me either, because that's the morbid world we're living in. It's a bit macabre, but, you know, there we go.
I believe Epstein was killed. I don't think he committed suicide. I think he was killed. And the problem with saying that is then everybody is going to agree based on their politics. Like the right is going to say, that's right, Clinton had him bumped off. And the left is going to say, no, Trump had him bumped off. And I'm sitting here in the middle going, actually, either side had plenty of reason to.
It wouldn't even have to be politicians. It could easily just be business people.
Yeah, the fact that it was done in prison definitely would implicate somebody in office.
I suppose, or it could implicate someone with a shit ton of money to buy off the people in office.
That's the thing. Because to me, the fact that the two guys that were supposed to be watching him just both happened to fall asleep when they were supposed to be watching him. Like, yeah, okay, that's shady. And so to me, I think, yeah, I kind of agree with Kate. I think someone just paid those guys off. Hey, look, you know, don't pay attention to this guy. Oh, leave certain things around that he's not supposed to have. And you know, what do you know? Oh, he killed himself. Oh, how sad, you know.
There would have to be way too many coincidences to happen for him to have been able to kill himself under his own initiative. Like,
right.
Way too many coincidences.
Yes, that's exactly why I don't believe the official story. Yeah.
Plenty of people with more than enough money and more than enough reason on both sides of the political spectrum that want him gone. So, yeah.
The thing we were talking about Kennedy, you know, one of the things that, because then the next question on that one is that, well, if you believe that may have been a conspiracy, you know, again, was it just two lone nuts, or is there something bigger? And one of the things that has occurred to me is that, just say it was the Soviets, I could see them saying, look, if people know this, we're going to have no choice but to go to war with the Soviets, and it could escalate into a nuclear war, and we can't let that happen. So we'll basically let it go, because the consequences of making it known is too great.
Right.
Because the fact that that's the other thing too, the fact that they sealed so much stuff for so long. I mean, and even after the Clinton administration, like, they accelerated when the stuff could be released, it's still like another 13 years before we get to see it.
Yeah.
I will be right back. I have hungry cats to feed.
I just want to bring in some of the chat now, because Josh, ZZZ Giant Awake, who would have been on camera, but he got here a bit late. He says this about his first one. The one he believes is most harmful historically is all the anti-Semitic bullshit. You mean I suppose you mean Holocaust denial and all that, I suppose. And then this one, he says, oops, I missed. There we go. The one he's most sympathetic to is Scientology claim that psychologists and the like exist as one big conspiracy by Lord Zeno to help keep us confused. Down with psychologists.
Okay. There's a big intersection between my own personal beliefs and those of Scientologists, in that I'm a psychotherapist, not a psychiatrist, right? And when I see Tom Cruise jumping up and down on Oprah's couch and just telling the world that, maybe you don't need these drugs, that's why I got into the field that I did, is because I believe in talk therapy. I believe in the power of words. I believe in the power of thinking your way out of it. There are some people who absolutely need medications, but I do believe that the vast majority of people who get prescribed certain medications don't need them. And the rates of certain medications being prescribed to children is shocking to me. So,
Well,
yeah. I'm with the Scientologists for a lot of their rhetoric. I'm like, that's a good point. It's just the whole Zeno thing. Ugh. But, overprescribing, it happens.
I'm not surprised by that. Hey, I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, because earlier we were talking about World War II and Coventry and all that sort of thing. And I find it interesting because, as values change with the new generations and, things change basically over time. The way that the United States decided to end World War II was obviously by dropping 2 nukes on Japan. And people of my generation in particular, obviously Generation X, who grew up in the Cold War, when I was a kid, I was basically trained to believe that we had no choice. We saved lives by doing it that way, because if we did an invasion with Japan, we would have killed 10 million Japanese people, blah, blah, blah. And it would take it 5 more years, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm very disturbed that there's ever been, even the first use of nuclear weapons, the utilitarian ethic argument for using nuclear weapons. Because if you want to take a utilitarian point of view, you should never go to war. You should only drop nukes, because why would you risk thousands of lives of your own soldiers when you can just drop a bomb and go surrender or die?
Because mutually assured destruction is why. That was the idea behind the 1980s version of the Cold War, was we have enough nukes to kill them 1,000 times over. They have enough nukes to kill us 1,000 times over. So no one will launch any nukes at all, because it'll end the world. I'm not sure that that's the best strategy in the world, but that was the idea.
I completely agree that mutual assured destruction is the doctrine that has kept us safe. And that's perverse. It's perverse. But the bottom line is, and we talked a little bit about this when we talked about disarming a little while back, but I mean, I don't know how we can ever get rid of nuclear weapons responsibly, because of the fact that, if my enemy has some, then I want some too. But just to revisit the whole World War II thing, I mean, do you guys accept the logic that it was better to drop those 2 bombs and kill, 50,000 or 250,000 people or whatever it was? Yeah, 250,000 people, rather than a long drawn out invasion? Is that logic?
I might have chosen a different target.
Say again?
I might have chosen a different target. I mean, they dropped it pretty much right in the middle of civilians. I would have gone for something a little more military basey.
Well, Nagasaki was actually a secondary target, because the primary target was too much cloud cover, so they couldn't hit it.
Still, I'm just saying, is like they did kind of drop it right on a city.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, the thing is that they picked, and even as a secondary target, they could have picked targets with even higher civilian population, but they chose the ones they did to try to minimize the casualties. The thing is, now, 2 things: the numbers we were told when we were kids are false. The amount of most American and Japanese that would have been saved, those numbers were cooked. However, now that we know the more accurate numbers, it still suggests that in the long run, fewer people died than if we had done the invasion, especially considering that even after 2 bombs, the Japanese high command was split, and it took the emperor to say, "We're done. That's it. I don't want," because they didn't know we didn't have more.
Right.
So he later was like, "Well, because in fact, a lot of people don't realize this. There was actually an attempted coup. Once the emperor said, 'Hey, tomorrow morning we're giving up,' there was an attempted coup. So there were still people within the hierarchy of Japan that were ready to basically take over, keep the emperor as a puppet, and basically lie to the public and continue the war. So, and that's after 2 nukes. So I feel that based on that, it probably ended up, being the better thing. Plus the fact that we know that if you say we didn't use nukes, we use firebombs, we know we killed more in firebombs in Dresden, firebombs in other places in Japan. So, that's like I said a few weeks ago back about drones. I don't get too hung up, when you're committing mass destruction and killing lots and lots of people. I don't get into the splitting hairs of, well, this way of maiming your fellow human being is more moral than that way of shredding human flesh. It's more of like what's the overall. But now and basically what Kate said is correct, that as far as the mutual assured destruction, that basically that the plan, the military plan in the early 50s for the U.S. was literally what you're saying, Paul. They drew the military down quite a lot, and they built around, we're just going to nuke people, and we won't have a convention. We just need enough troops to go mop up after the fact. And that's one of the reasons why Oppenheimer and a few others basically helped the Russians get the bomb, because he said like, because he pictured we would become this nuclear bully that would have just walked around and just nuked everything in sight that we didn't like. So he said we needed the Soviet Union to kind of counter that.
Well,
And,
that's kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
Well, I see what Curious One is saying. Can we nuke Iran? No. Quebec.
That's
No,
funny.
I was going to say, and Joe actually answered kind of without me saying anything, kind of responds to what I was going to say. And I was going to say that basically nuking Japan was very unsportsmanlike. Like there is no defense. So, but on the other hand, yeah, we were firebombing, so that did more damage, killed more people. So,
Well, I mean, there's such a thing as total war, and I think in recent decades the United States has been reluctant to commit to total war, which is the annihilation of your enemy. I mean, if you read The Art of War, basically, if you really want to accomplish a goal, you can show no mercy. I mean, you have to be committed to destroying, to making them surrender. And if you don't adopt that attitude, you have a war in Afghanistan that lasts for 20 years. You know what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think we should have done anything more severe in Afghanistan. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, long, prolonged, ongoing war is the natural result of not having an end plan, not having an end game. So now, as regards to nuclear weapons, I know that I can't put my head into Truman's head and his advisors. I know I can't do that. But for me personally, if I saw that first test bomb go off and realized that would happen, I personally could never have given that order. I know everything that's implied by that. I personally couldn't do it. And it reminds me, because we've been recently talking, because of all the Black Lives Matter and the post George Floyd murder protests, talking about getting into the head of the slave owning generations and whatever like that. You just can't do it. We were raised with the values and our modern culture, and it is impossible, frankly, to project your head into a different generation whose realities were completely different. That doesn't mean that we can't judge their actions. And I think that's true whether it comes to Truman or whether it's George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or anybody else that people have been talking about, should we revere these people because of their historical significance versus what they actually did, in their everyday life. So I personally think that we have to balance somehow. How do you balance nuclear? How do you balance it saying, you know what, I'm going to kill 250,000 people, and that'll be better in the long run? I mean, that to me, that's just a profound presumption to make.
There are some ways that I find the It doesn't matter if it was a different time, we can still judge them thing. There's a few ways where I think that's been taken too far. Like, for example, when it comes to, say, movies where people are going, Ferris Bueller is really the villain, right? And I'm like, dude, quit trumping all over my nostalgia. That's where I start to draw some lines. But other than that, I agree with the idea of judging people from history by the standards of today. Obviously, I agree with that. But damn it, quit messing with my movies and TV.
Well, I mean, you don't have to agree with them. And my thing is, if someone makes a judgment about something that I like, that based on modern context, and if I don't agree, I just ignore them. I don't. And the thing is, I don't get upset. What's that?
It's hard to ignore sometimes, simply because of the like some of the overcorrections that people do, where it's like, oh, by the way, we're going to remake your favorite movie, but we're going to gender and race flip everybody. And it's like, but then why not just make something original? Please just make something original instead.
And I agree that that's a better way. But I mean, to me, like okay, the more recent Battlestar Galactica, and I didn't like it for a lot of reasons. But so to me, they just don't exist. I don't. They're not for me. They're for a different audience.
Here's the problem with that, though. Like, I thought that the cinematic abortion that was the attempted Tron sequel was absolutely awful. But if I search Tron, or even Tron Original, or Tron 1982, a huge portion of the results are Tron Legacy. So the thing I love is getting superseded by the thing that came out that I can't stand. And I'm sure it's the same thing with Battlestar Galactica. If I start looking up space Mormons, I will end up with grim, unhappy people from the other series. So it's like that's part of the problem, is that everything just supplants the stuff I cared about.
But that happens. It's always going to happen. We're going to die, or are going to die someday, and preferably not the same day. And, everything that we like, we care about, is going to be supplanted by something else. So that's why.
I'll tell you what. When it happens on the day I die, I'll be fine with it. Wait that long, and then you can start changing everything I love.
But to Paul's point, though, about not being able to, I mean, could I personally press the button? It's basically the trolley problem. Do you let the trolley hit one person or hit 5 people? And as much as we can, in our rational brains, say, okay, setting it off so that it only kills 1 instead of 5 is the logical and actually more compassionate thing to do. But could we actually do it? I don't know. I mean, a lot of us can't do it. And that's why it's a dilemma, right?
Yeah. Well, I know we've talked a little bit in previous podcasts about, the fact that Trump desperately wants to push that button. And the other day, or a couple weeks ago, when Sister Danger was on the show, I think somebody asked whether or not, she asked whether or not Trump could use a nuclear weapon as a first strike. And someone on the panel said that he could. It's my understanding that he can't, because a first strike with a nuclear weapon is de facto a declaration of war. And the president does not have the power to declare war.
Congress needs to do that.
It's kind of murky because the president can use military force for up to a certain period of time. Now, whether or not he can deploy nukes under that auspices, I don't know, but I would think that it's probably not cut and dry. It's probably, I guess, frowned upon, or it's kind of been the standard, but I don't know that in law that he's prevented.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it is in law, but I think that it definitely is in the Constitution that the power to declare war is vested in the House of Representatives with Congress, right? And it is also definitely true that there's no scenario that anyone can imagine that dropping a nuclear weapon as a first strike is not a declaration of war.
Well, I mean, you could say that really about any use of military, any offensive use of military anywhere, but we don't. That's not how we actually treat it, though. And
I agree with you, Joe, but it's unambiguous when it's a nuclear weapon. I mean, if you drop a Tomahawk missile on a building and knock a building down in, I don't know, Tehran or whatever, that's one thing. But if you drop a nuclear weapon on a nuclear power plant in Iran, that's something else.
One thing I've often wondered about, I mean, if the United States does launch a nuke at somebody, and it's just one, and it's at one enemy of ours, I don't know, what will the rest of the nuclear armed countries think of that? I mean,
Right.
would they see this bomb go off and go, oh shit, we're next and let's launch now? Like I'm so worried if one nuke goes off, it ignites everything else. I
Right.
don't know.
I think
Also,
the
to
first
what
thing they're doing-
GA5524 said, no, I haven't watched the new She-Ra cartoon, but I've seen images and I'm fucking offended by it.
Mm.
Now, Paul, to your point, the if knocking a building down with a tomahawk is actually an act of war.
I get it, but it's a bit of it's completely less ambiguous when it's a nuclear weapon. You know what I mean? You are definitely starting a war. It's not going to be like we shall what's the word they use? Proportionately respond. What's the proportionate response to a nuclear attack? Open war.
And it's not like you can say, oh, that nuke was just a police action.
Yeah, right.
Now, again, as a legal, as a moral and ethical issue, I don't disagree with you. But I mean, as a legal one, the War Powers Act probably allows it. Again, I don't want anyone to ever do it. I want there to be a prohibition against ever doing that. To be quite direct.
I recall back in 2018, the House of Representatives passed a bill to specifically deny the president the ability to use a nuclear weapon as a first strike, and it is still sitting in the Senate waiting to be addressed. It hasn't even been taken to the floor, along with about 400 or 500 other bills that the House has passed in the past 2.5 years that Mitch McConnell is too busy confirming judges to do any actual legislative work.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing. The fact that the House had to pass that bill tells me that the president currently could do it. And unfortunately, McConnell is so screwed up that he doesn't care enough about America and the world to actually enact a bill that would be pretty good for America and the world.
Yeah, it's funny. This is not the first time someone has said I should be president. I'm just looking at the chat.
Well, it's funny.
Allegedly, somewhere in some dark cabinet, shut away wherever we keep all of the used ballots, there are 2 that I know of for sure have my name on them written in for president.
Well, see, the thing is, Kate, I'm surprised him saying that because, basically your politics are so out of line with his that I don't think he'd actually be happy.
Well, maybe not. Well, I mean, that's the thing, though. I have to wonder, like, if we were to get a president that agrees with me in there and they end up making this world significantly better, would there be still those like holdout right wingers going, nope, got it wrong? Yeah, like even if they're going, well, my medical bills are taken care of, I'm making one hell of a living wage, we're not in the middle of a bunch of wars, and I'm not going bankrupt from medical bill, this, that, and the other thing. But you know what? Darn it, you still support people having sex without having a baby, so deal breaker.
Hey, Kate, look, Bill Clinton balanced the budget. He did the welfare reform, the crime bill, a whole lot of things the Republican liked, plus balancing the budget, and they still hated him. Obama, things, he instituted actually kind of a middle of the road, semi-right-wing healthcare plan, did a bunch of things that they've been clamoring for years. He gave them way too much, as we all agree, and they still. So the answer is yes, because it's tribal. It's not about the.
In that case, because that leads me to the second part of this question. Suppose we were able to dress a progressive in conservative clothing and made them all think, oh, this progressive person is the most rabid Republican you ever saw. And then they vote for this person. They enact a ton of progressive policies. Will their tribalism keep them from seeing how out of line with the right wing this particular president was?
Yes, because Trump has done that without being progressive. But Trump has shot all their illusions down. The whole thing, like, I am never, ever, ever going to tolerate another religious right person talking to me about the morals of the moral character of the president being so important to them or anything like that. All that bullshit they were spewing 22 years ago about Clinton and whatever. And don't get me wrong, I can't stand Bill Clinton, okay? But that was total bullshit what was happening at the end of the 90s. And all these people like Lindsey Graham, for example, talking about how you don't even have to commit a crime to be impeached and whatever. And then Trump comes up with a fucking docket a mile long, and he's like, well, it's, the whole thing is so corrupt and disgusting. It's pissing me off. But I can't stand the hypocrisy of these right-wing people who have basically jettisoned everything they said they believed in just because Trump's their hero.
Yep.
But why even is Trump their hero? That's the part I don't get.
It's identity politics. That's the irony. They complain about identity politics on the left, but Trump's all about right-wing identity, white identity, Christian identity.
Well, one of the things I've heard is just that they actually like him because he's a bully. That they love him being a bully. They love him being a allegedly a tough guy. And like, so that makes me think, I mean, what if we ran a well and truly abrasive progressive who is a bully, who wants to like smack people around with that baseball bat and get the right wing going, hell yeah. You know, and of course, all the progressives have to be in on it. They have to know, oh, this is just an act. I mean, that's why I wanted that one dude, and I wish I could remember his name. He dropped out of the race for president for getting the Democrat nomination really early. He looked like somebody's football coach. He looked like a drill sergeant.
Yes,
and
I do.
who the hell, what is his name? I can never remember it. But I mean, when I was listening to his policies, I was going, you know, I don't 100% agree with him, but if he was president, I'd be okay with it. But I think that the right wing would love it too, because he's like ex-military and he looks like it. He looks like a right winger. He talks like a right winger, but he says left-wing things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have no doubt. I thought the same thing myself, Kate, that if we had some bombastic asshole, but had progressive policies, they would be more okay with that than somebody who was kinder, gentler. I mean, think about that. They made fun of, when George H.W. Bush was president, he said he wanted a kinder, gentler America, and Republicans made fun of him. His own party made fun of him. Webb, that was a guy. So here's the other thing too, as far as facts. I mean, basically, Sam Brownback a few years ago, he put full on, trickle down, unrestricted, because he had control of the governorship and the state house and the courts, and they put forward the most right wing, trickle down policies ever that we've ever had anywhere in the country, and it was a mammoth failure. It was so bad that there were Republicans actually saying, hey, some of the more reasonable Republicans say, hey, let's vote for the Democrats because it wrecked the economy of the state. Yet Brownback lost only by a little bit. Think about that.
It's not Webb. Webb isn't the one I'm thinking of. It's actually Richard Ojeda.
Oh, yeah. The guy from West Virginia.
Yes, that guy. I mean, he was talking the talk, but he sounded like a right winger when he did it.
Yeah, well, he's ex-military. Yeah, he was running for Senate in West Virginia.
Well, he threw his hat in as president for a while and then dropped out early.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's why.
And that killed the convo. Yay!
That's why we need ranked choice voting.
Absolutely.
Paul, I have a feeling that the inability to commit to total war is going to actually cost us a lot of communities around the world to just being absorbed by the bigger bullies around them. Russia taking over Crimea being one example, but the most recent being Hong Kong is just dead in the water, going to be taken over by China. And what really pains me is seeing that they're about to be without Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. All of these companies are pulling up out of the city and won't be offering services. They'll be blocking all the IPs to Hong Kong. And we all know why. It's because China does not want video of how brutal this takeover is going to be.
Yeah.
They don't want video of their army going through Hong Kong and leveling it.
Yeah.
And that video should be spread around the world. And these companies are afraid of what will happen to them in their own countries if they don't play by China's rules where it concerns Hong Kong, because China can affect policy in America and have American politicians sanction these social media companies in order for China to have its way with Hong Kong.
And if you think about how extra fucked up it is that what's still a nominally a communist autocracy using capitalism to get capitalists to help them protect their communist autocratic regime.
That's a good observation.
That's beyond fucked. And it's all over money instead of just saying, hey, look, because 30 years ago, I don't think you would have had that, because you would have had, there would have been enough the right wing, even the right wing capitalists would be like, no, we're not going to support a ultra left wing, communist autocrat. But now it's like, oh, well, if we don't shut off to Hong Kong, they'll make us shut off the rest of China, and that'll cut into our bottom line. So fuck freedom and democracy.
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to remember when once upon a time American companies would say, no, that's not how we do things. I guess we just won't serve your country. But China is now too big and too powerful to ignore. No company can afford to let its competition get an edge on them in China. So it's just a matter of, you have to lick the boot, basically, because they have so much sway and so much power, both economically and, quite frankly, politically as well.
Well, again, it's another reason why I don't ever want to hear really anything from right wingers, because again, they could talk about how they're anti-communist and anti-autocracy and all that shit, but if they're basically willing to sell that out for money, then they have no principles whatsoever.
Just want to bring in Phoenix Rider here. I feel sick when I see some Hong Kongers waving our flag because they want us to help them. Honey Charles, we're not going to do squat under this administration. Neither did we do anything in 1989 when George Bush was president. They were waving the American flag. I recall they made a mock statue which resembled the Statue of Liberty, but it wasn't quite the same. But it was a statue for liberty, I suppose.
Yeah.
And about 2 days after that, they crushed the demonstration brutally. George H.W. Bush didn't do anything either. So whilst I agree that Trump won't do anything, that doesn't really distinguish him.
Well, I have to admit, like, if I were president, I'd be a little more of an isolationist, to be honest. I would pull back as many of our troops as I possibly could, certainly out of the wars we have. And I would stop all of the adventurism, all of the overt acts of war that aren't war, legally speaking, apparently, all of these police actions and regime change and all this shit. I just knock it all off. And if someone wanted the United States' help, make them ask for it instead of going in and assuming it's just our job to be the world's policeman or to give aid to everybody and their hamster. I want to give aid to people, but darn it, sometimes we're just not welcome. Well, and I think it's time we respected that. We don't own the planet.
Damn right.
Well, plus the fact, if you think about, again, how right-wingers don't actually believe in what they supposedly believe. Up until, I mentioned this last time, up until the Cold War, we always maintained a small military. And that's actually a very conservative principle, because if you're worried about government overreach, you don't let the government carry around a big sword that they can go around sticking into things. The idea is to actually being isolationist is actually a conservative policy.
Yeah, Joe, but let me just briefly, isn't it the case that when they framed the Constitution, we weren't supposed to have a standing army at all?
Well, it didn't really say, but that was the tradition, was to not have much of an army at the time. And in fact, that's why you needed a militia, because you needed.
That was my understanding.
Rally up.
Also, though, as much as I understand why someone might describe isolationism as a conservative policy, given what conservatism means in the United States today, I have to say it's not. Because the main reason I'd be doing it is for a left-wing hippie give peace a chance reason. And the last thing anyone would describe that as is conservative. So,
because you got to remember, though, that the modern definitions of liberal and conservative are not the classical. They don't.
I know, but we're living here in these modern times, so it helps to use the modern definitions. I'm just saying.
I'm saying like the the classical ones is just to kind of and you're right, and you're basically coming at the same answer from a different perspective.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, we're making a distinction without a difference, really, but still.
Right. I gotta say, Lucas says here that he would be happy if America stayed. I think he meant neutral, like Switzerland. With respect, I can't agree with that, Lucas. The United States has under Donald Trump has abdicated its position as leader in the world, and it's not just with the coronavirus. There's lots of things, but just on the coronavirus alone, look what's happening because Donald Trump is the president right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole world is fucked up because it's already to the point where Americans can't leave. We can't go abroad now, and that affects me personally. Right, I'm going to be stuck here for quite some time. Because we're not safe to travel because it's the most dangerous coronavirus country in the world. You know, that's only one example. So I think if we took a neutral position, other powerful actors would take advantage of that to our detriment.
Right. Plus the fact that, think of the words of Elie Wiesel, that neutrality favors the oppressor.
That's true.
So I would say no. We just don't want. As Kate said, get rid of the adventurism. Stop. In fact, if anything, I got an argument with somebody years ago, a Canadian, and they were angry at us because of Somalia. And my thing was actually going into Somalia to try to help the aid workers distribute food and stop the famine. That's actually one of the few moral reasons for using military force, is to make sure, because I said otherwise you're going to be a checkbook liberal and you're going to sign off and say, oh, I donated to the famine, and meanwhile knowing that the warlords are just going to steal all it, and then so the average person was still going to starve to death. So you're just patting yourself on the back. To me, that was the one of the few times to say, yeah, you know what, we're going to go out there and we're going to distribute the aid, and we're going to make sure it doesn't get stolen by warlords and thieves who are and dictators who would basically have everybody else suffer. So yeah, no, don't be neutral, just stop being adventurous.
Hey, you know the difference between Hitler and a jockstrap? One's a dictator, the other's a dictator. Sorry, that popped through my head as soon as you said it. It said dictator, and I couldn't help it.
Oh, I had something I was going to say, and I completely knocked it out.
Sorry.
No. Oh man, what was I going to say anyway? What were you just talking about?
China.
China, not being neutral.
Not being neutral. Thank you. Yeah, not being neutral. I think I'm not a military expert, obviously, despite my T-shirt. Having said that, I know the United States has military bases in more than 100 countries, right? I don't know the actual number, but I know it's more than 100. And I know in some of those countries, like Britain, for example, there's more than one. So it occurs to me that I'm just going to pick a number that's like I say, amateur, not official, not based on anything. Just pick a number for the sake of discussion. If we cut our military bases abroad in half, you're talking about tens of billions of dollars in savings. And we still have incredible reach. We'd have more reach around the world than any of our competitors, even if we cut them in half. So I'm just wondering, maybe we could get some movement cutting down our military budget, because it grows every year. Under Trump, it has grown exponentially. Trump somehow managed to get the Democratic majority in the House of Representatives to offer him more money than he was asking for the military budget. Now, if you're a Democratic politician in the House and you honestly believe that Trump is a danger to both our country and abroad, why are you giving him more money for the fucking military? It's infuriating that the Democrats went along with that, because until we stop basically milking this cow, it's never going to end. It's only going to get worse.
Well, the biggest problem that I find with the Democrats, and I've said this for a very long time, is that in an effort to not, they're so afraid of the Republicans trying to make them look weak that they often behave weakly. So it's just like
sorry,
not a problem.
If you halved our bases overseas, that would not be tens of billions. That would be hundreds of billions.
Fair play. Yep.
And not all of those bases are actually paid for by us, even though we control them. For example, in Kuwait, all of our bases there are paid for by the Kuwaiti government.
Okay.
Right. But but Paul's point is a good one. The other thing too, there's actually an analogy to the whole defund the police thing, because there's a lot of things that are done by the military that could be done by civilians. There are some things that are considered bases that are like research stations. And okay, that's great. We probably still want to have the research station, but why are armed people, military forces, involved with those functions? They have nothing to do with the actual military.
Actually, I can answer that. I actually know the answer to that. You see, what's going on is that they are the beginning of a melding between science, like scientists and soldiers, the military and scientists. And with Trump coming up with Space Force, and you notice that the logo looks suspiciously like the logo for Starfleet, which is, as I said, military and science together. So what you're seeing is proto Star Trek. I'm also kidding. Don't take me seriously.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Basically, there's a lot of things that we could do just using civilians, and probably much more cheaply than we do because we're doing it under the auspices of the military, or it could be under NASA or NOAA or any of those things. And plus the fact that when we go out there and we have people in uniform, it definitely creates, unfortunately, usually a negative backlash in the local communities, because whatever we do, like if I'm a scientist and I'm out there at a research station and I commit a crime, I'm just going to get arrested by the locals and I'm going to get treated that way. And maybe the consulate helps me and maybe they don't. But if I'm in uniform, the response by the U.S. is completely different. In a lot of cases, there's actually been cases where, particularly in Japan, where we've smuggled people out of countries so that they don't have to face local justice. And that creates a horrible, relations problem between these countries. Whereas if it was just me and I just did something stupid and I pay my crime and that's the end of it, it doesn't create a backlash on America. But
Kate saying Starfleet is the tone of Rob saying Nazis.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm
very similar.
Okay. Do you mean literally tone of voice, or do you mean the vibe of what we said?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, one thing people have to understand, I've been known for being a rabid and screaming Star Wars fan, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm anti-Trek. In fact, I've been binge watching TNG lately. I do like the concept behind Star Trek. I think that's great. I think there are a couple of ways that it was implemented poorly, but I've warmed up to it a bit, I guess.
We had a pretty good conversation about Star Trek the time me and you just did our podcast together, Kate, didn't we? That was a good podcast, as I recall.
Yeah.
I love Star Trek personally, but Kate, I want to ask you a specific question. Are you in favor of the fact that Trump has made Space Force?
Oh, geez. See, I'm of two minds about that one, because I think that what he wants us to do is really freaking goofy. But I like the idea of creating a space agency, let's say, something along the lines of
like the National Aeronautics and Space Agency?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, but one that's actually like no longer a joke. I mean, that's the problem. It's like, I seem to remember that NASA was still really, really cool to everybody until Challenger. And that was like the beginning of the end for NASA, really. And now nobody seems to give a crap about space anymore. And so if it takes creating a new space agency to get people super pumped about space again, I'm all for it. I don't necessarily like the fact that it's a military organization, but then again, it seemed like most of the original astronauts were military people anyway, so it's kind of built into the system.
But before he did this, there was already was a Space Command.
Yeah.
It was already existed. I mean, he just reinvented something we already had. So
Right.
it was something that we already had.
Was it something we were even doing anything with, though? I mean, he seems to think we're actually moving forward with it.
Yeah, I know people who are in Space Command.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What kinds of things did it do? Because I mean, honestly, I've never really heard of it until quite recently. So if they were doing anything, it wasn't exactly in our faces.
The mission of Space Force is no different than the mission of Space Command.
Okay.
It's no different.
Okay, see, you guys are obviously much more well informed than me, because Kate mentioned a minute ago what Trump wants to do with Space Force, and you just said what you just said. So you guys obviously have heard something, because as far as I know, we have a title, Space Force, and we have a place out there.
Well,
That's
I mean,
all I know about it. That's all I've heard about it.
I mean, see, that's the thing is what I've heard is what you've heard, but plus it's going to be the military and not like science or research. That's
Right.
the only extra bit that I know that you didn't.
What does that mean? Does that mean they're going to be shooting enemy satellites out of the sky?
It was
I
already,
think maybe.
it was already the military, though. The Space Command was part of the military. It already existed. It just didn't exist. It just didn't exist as its own branch. Before it was part of the Air Force.
Right.
Okay, but what was it actually doing?
Well, yeah. Basically, what they were responsible for is any military operation that was above 100 kilometers over the surface. So, military satellites, tracking systems, all that. So, the people who tracked whether or not someone's launching nuclear weapons, listening for the echoes from nuclear weapons, tracking the radiation, that's Space Force.
Okay.
Operating the satellites, all the birds, that's Space Force.
Well, I get the impression that what Trump wants to do is a lot closer to having X-Wings.
Well, I get the impression that what we're just talking about, that the Space Force is there to take out enemy satellites, intelligence satellites, but that also puts creates a space race for them to get out there to take out our satellites. And let's just consider for a second. I mean, you could probably take out satellites from the surface of the Earth with missiles anyway. I don't really know.
Yeah. Right.
But having said that, here's the thing. I was pretty sure we signed a treaty back in the 70s to say we were going to keep war out of space, and not like all agree not to target each other's satellites and stuff like that. Specifically because, especially now, 50 years later, we are so dependent on our satellites. What we're doing right now wouldn't be possible without satellites.
Well, and I agree with you, Paul. However, basically, we developed anti-satellite weapons in the 80s.
Right.
Now, again, they were deployed. F-15s carried them, or could have carried them, and and that's it's gonna be interesting because this, anytime you split a force like this, you always get into jurisdiction. So technically speaking, the Space Force weapon, the anti-satellite weapons will belong to Space Force, but the aircraft that deployed the weapon will belong to the Air Force. Wasn't a big deal when Space Command was part of the Air Force, but now it actually creates a jurisdictional issue.
In the 1980s,
the thing that I thought
billions of dollars on the Star Wars program. Billions and billions and billions of dollars developing the Star Wars program. It was like one of his biggest projects. So
I nominate Paul.
Well, one of the things that, and I think this was the point with the Star Wars program, was to shoot down other people's nukes. And like, if we had that capability, that would give us way the hell too much power, because then we're the only ones who can nuke anybody.
right.
Mm.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You wanted to use lasers. That was laser weapons in space.
Well, lasers and kinetic energy weapons and a bunch of other things as well. What's interesting?
Mass drivers and rail guns.
Part of that project helped develop some of the defense stuff, like the close-in weapons, the close-in weapons system for like ships. So if you remember the Stark incident when the Iraqis accidentally or in purpose, accidentally on purpose attacked one of our ships. This is when Saddam was still our friend. It was a frigate that got hit and like 37 guys got killed. Well, basically, when that incident happened, the weapons system detected the missile coming in. Again, this was all stuff that was outgrowth of the SDI program. It detected the missile coming in, but the problem was, and it actually correctly identified it as an Exocet missile. But the problem is it looked in its inventory, it says, oh, Exocet, that's a French missile. That's a NATO missile. It's an Allied. We're not going to shoot. Don't shoot that one. That's an Allied web. It wasn't sophisticated enough to say, hey, is it tracking us? Is it coming at us? Or is it just going by us? And so it just, the system shut down and then allowed the missile to hit the ship, and 37 sailors got killed.
What's funny to me is if they had on that team a gamer, that might not have happened.
Oh, absolutely. And
I mean, there are so many things these days where I'm like, your team just needed someone who was outside of your circle and wasn't all echo chambery to have corrected the mistakes you made.
Well, and this is the reason why I'm not totally on board with self-driving vehicles. As someone who does automation for a living, because I know the limitations, and I know that was right there. That was someone failed to think of that eventuality or that contingency, and so it wasn't in the program. So the program did what it was supposed to do. Unfortunately, something happened that didn't account for it.
What if your self-driving car ends up in a kind of trolley problem situation? Do I hit that station wagon head on, or do I steer into the sidewalk and squish all the grannies?
Right.
Or do I sacrifice myself on the grill of the semi that's coming towards us? How does a computer make that moral judgment of who should die worse?
Right. Paul,
Paul, you're totally like.
Yeah, I'm positive you're saying something great.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot. They're making algorithms right now, prioritizing human lives just in the most disgusting way. For artificial intelligence to do exactly what to decide which person to kill in which eventuality, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I don't know
that someone making that program said, oh, by the way, the darker the skin, the less they're worth.
Who knows? I mean, that's scary, isn't it? The potential for something like that to even be put in, because you wouldn't know that was programmed into the damn device. You'd never know that.
Mm-hmm.
The black box user.
Oh, you were appealing to the fact that we had a treaty to not bring war to space, and so I'm going to nominate you to break it to the president that treaties are valuable.
But again, it was interesting. There was a video, and I was going to do a response to it, and it never happened. But you had done a video, Paul, about self-driving cars and the various moral and ethical dilemmas and practical dilemmas, for that matter. And so I and one other person who's also an automation specialist, we responded in comments, and we're basically saying, yeah, we're not sanguine on them, at least not yet. And there was somebody in the comments that was like, but what about the process? There was no focus on the hardware and the processor speed. And I'm like, that is like, that's like saying I got the best TV in the world, but if you don't hook it up to something, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What you put, what you load onto it is what matters. And then a week after, and arguing, and it's funny because he goes, well, I'll just stick with what the experts say. And I'm like, we are experts, you asshole. But a week later is when that accident happened where that woman got killed. And exactly for the reason I had suggested, because the problem is that, you're so obsessed with how fast the program works. And even if you have a program that's thought of a billion different contingencies, it's still dependent on the inputs. So you have a vision system that looks out, it's got a camera, and it interprets what it's seeing. I said, well, all it takes is everything that's electromechanical will fail. It's not if, when. Everything fails, everything. So when it fails, what does the system do? And if you don't have backup sensors, you don't have all these extra things, if the input to the system is limited, then the output of the system is going to be similarly limited. Beyond, you could write the best program in the world, and that's a problem I have sometimes dealing with customers. Something bad happens, and then they try to blame the program, and I say, well, no, your field sensor failed, and we have certain contingencies, but you can only protect up to a certain level of failure. Otherwise you never get the program done. So it's like the program reacted the way it's supposed to. It's just that it's the sensing devices didn't operate the way they were supposed to, and that's all. Or the equipment failed. In some cases, equipment fails too. So basically, in that case, a piece of equipment failed, and so it didn't see the person coming, and it hit the person. That's going to happen.
Sure. On that point, right? I'd like everybody to respond to this really, because if there was self-driving cars tomorrow, and let's just say for the sake of argument that they work these kinks out to the highest possible standard that's humanly available, right? And so we're all forced to drive self-driving cars so that everyone is equal, right? And so everyone is equally culpable. Now, here's the thing. You have to have insurance to drive a car. If you have a self-driving car, do the manufacturers have to pay if there's an accident, or do you have to pay as the owner of the car, even though you weren't operating the car?
Currently, you do.
Well, that's my point. You're not operating the car.
Right.
So why should you be liable at all?
Because the maintenance of that car is your responsibility. Currently.
No, but you're not driving it. The maintenance is, but you can't interdict the car. You can't stop the car from doing what it was going to do.
If my car is parked on a hill and the parking brake breaks and the thing rolls down the hill and crashes, even though I wasn't operating the vehicle, I'm still liable. That's the way it is right now.
That's because no one's driving the car and it's yours. No one's driving the car in the same sense that there's not a person operating the vehicle, but there is a company which is responsible for making that brain driving the car. They are responsible, aren't they?
It depends.
They should be, but they're not.
It depends. Like, it would depend on what the failure was.
Right. Well, but that's the other thing too, Paul. That's a good point, Rob. Okay, like I have a system. I had a service call earlier today. Technically it's an incinerator. They don't call it that because that's not politically correct. You don't want to say incinerator, but basically it's a chemical waste incinerator. And is there a burner in there? It's a dangerous system. If it's possible for volatile organics to build up to an explosive level, and the thing could blow up. So now there's all sorts of safeguards, so that if we see, and we're measuring these things, and so if we see that happening, there's a whole sequence of operations that puts it into a safe mode so that it won't blow up. However, if the devices that tell my system that there's an explosive environment or could potentially explosive environment building fail, it's gonna blow up. Am I liable? Because no, I would say no, because I don't maintain those sensors. I didn't install them. Even though I installed them, I'm not on the hook for them forever. So it's up to the person who owns the system to maintain it properly, because in the case of that car, that's somebody, if now that was owned by the company who made the car, but just say it belonged to me. If the sensor that detects people on the road failed, that's my car. It's my fault.
Well, all right. Suppose it's a brand ass new car. You've had it less than an hour coming off the lot. There's nothing you could possibly have maintained. If this car breaks, it was broken by the manufacturer, no doubt about it. Then who's liable?
Now the answer is that it's shared, and there actually would be a lawsuit against the manufacturer, because we have that now. If you go out and you drive your car and the brakes fail in the first hour while it's still under warranty, you could sue GM and you'd probably win.
Okay. Right. But then someone would probably also sue you as the driver of the car.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so sue GM, ask for a shit ton more than you're being dinged for, huh?
Absolutely.
Some things are a design flaw. And if it's a design flaw, the manufacturers should be liable for it. And most of the time they are. If it's a failure because you failed to maintain it, well, then that's you. Then you're on the hook. You're on the hook for that.
But it sounds as if even a design flaw will be treated as your fault if it's your car, because apparently you have to maintain it.
You would have to prove that the design flaw.
Okay.
And any car when you're driving it, just
for that then.
Right. Any car that you're driving, just because you're driving it and you own it, just the act of doing that, you assume a certain amount of liability.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I'm not on board with them yet. I'm just not, because there's so many things that can go wrong that we haven't even thought of yet. And my biggest thing is, and again, because I work with automation systems, one of the things that can happen is if you have two control variables that affect the same thing, that they could fight one another. So you usually have to put some logic in there to give one deference over the other, depending on other circumstances. You have to build some smarts into it. Otherwise, the thing can go out of control. So my thing is, if you're going to have fleets of self-driving cars, that's only going to work if you have some sort of infrastructure that is basically tracking the movement of all the cars, and its job is just to tell the other cars where to go. So it says, oh, this car's coming on here and has to get over there. I'm going to stage these others to allow it to pass so that they don't create a problem. And okay, this one had a blowout and this car is swerving. Oh, I've got to tell these other cars, warn the other cars to give it enough time to react. Otherwise, they're going to be a pileup. So
I think that day is coming, Joe. I think that is exactly what will happen if there ever is like sort of 70 or 80% take up of self-driving cars. I think that's exactly the way forward. I think that's what will happen.
What I was thinking while Joe was talking was that the only way automatic cars like that, self-driving cars like that could work is if everyone had one.
Right.
Because like I was also trying to picture like a scenario where someone's in a self-driving car and a bunch of like rowdy teenagers or rednecks or whatever aren't and decide to try to run someone off the road. I mean, how does an automatic car like that deal with other people's mischief?
Right, and that's definitely an issue. I mean, right now, see, the thing is, people now point out to, oh, well, this self-driving car drove from, China to Europe and didn't get in any accidents. I'm like, well, right, but they chose a path that was ideal, and they did all these things because they wanted to work. So they did all these things to give it as favorable as possible, and plus, people, generally speaking, on the average, are actually okay drivers. And the other thing I've heard too that is absolutely false is people will say, well, you can any self-driving car will drive better than any human. That is absolutely false. Absolutely false. Because a program that you're writing is written for the typical. It's written. It's maintained to be reliable and all that. But there's a lot of cases I've seen where a person, if you could dedicate a person to some task, they could outdo the computer because they have intuition the computer will never have. But the thing is that what a computer does is it does whatever it does repeatably and with the same level of reliability, assuming that all the gadgets connected to it are working.
One thing about self-driving cars that bothers me, and it's particularly on my mind in where I live now. I mean, self-driving cars is fine if you live in a sort of urban or suburban area where the roads are fairly regular and traffic and stuff can be monitored because there's already monitoring equipment. But driving in the snow is hard enough for a human being, and it scares me to think of all the subtle counteractions you have to do if your car starts to drift this way. Because if you overdo it even a little bit, you spin, and it's really, really dangerous driving in snow anyway.
Right.
And to put my life into the hope that this car is better at that than I am, nah, I'd rather take my life into my own hands. That's just me. I can't imagine having that much faith in a machine that I would just like surrender, to that level.
I was raised in Vermont, and it snows quite a bit there. And we had the whole, one wheel spins and doesn't gain traction, so you can't get out kind of thing. I mean, can an automatic car know how to get out of a snowbank in Vermont? I don't know.
Probably not. Or maybe if it's not too bad, but probably not. And that's the other issue. Because you cannot, that whole thing of sliding on the ice. The control system is going to say, okay, if I want to be going there and I'm not going in the right direction, it's going to want to correct. But we all, those of us who've driven on snow, know that sometimes you have to turn into the skid to get yourself out of the skid. And maybe somebody thought of that and wrote that into a routine, but at what point does that trigger, because it doesn't have the sense of feel. We feel, so we have a sense, and yes, you can build an accelerometer and all this kind of shit, but I just don't think that in that the computer is going to be able to handle all those things, no matter how fast it is. Because again, it's not the speed, it's the program and the sensors.
I think the most likely scenario is going to be self-driving cars that you just can switch to manual.
Oh, I thought that was inherent in the whole design idea.
So I mean, so as far as snow and all that stuff, you're going to be driving it. You're going to have control of the vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, look, the idea of saying, hey, you know what? I went out, I drank a little bit too much. I want to get home, but I don't want to put myself and everybody else in jeopardy. And so I want my car to take me home. So I don't have to leave my car and get a ride and all that crap. Well, certainly my younger self, that would be very attractive. Yeah, I mean, will it happen? Will the day come where they can be safe and reliable and more, and have a better record than human drivers? Eventually, yeah.
As of right now, there's 34,000 deaths in the U.S. Auto deaths a year or so.
Right. And the funny thing is, somebody said to me, they tried to compare it to the fact that aircraft are on autopilot, and I'm like, that's not even close to the same. And you're in a sky lane where the nearest, it's a near miss if somebody comes within a mile of you. So it's not even close to the same kind of thing. I mean, there's certain analogies to it, but it's certainly not a perfect analogy.
So
I'm just picturing like open the garage door, car. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Yeah.
I've given a lot of thought to some of those things that Joe's talking about because I facilitate the therapy that people who are sentenced to after getting a DUI. And I've thought about, will driverless cars eliminate my profession? Because they might eliminate DUIs. I'm like, nope. The technology of Uber making taxis way cheaper didn't even affect it at all.
Right.
The coronavirus creating a pandemic where everybody's supposed to stay at home has not slowed down DUIs. People are getting drunk more often at home, and they're still finding reasons that they want to go out and drive while they're drunk, and they get caught, and they get sentenced, and the business keeps on going. And
one thing that someone, I thought you were done. Well, one thing that someone pointed out is if we get like driverless cars and like driverless Lyft and Uber and taxis and all of that, is that at some point a car will arrive at its destination with a dead body in it. Like someone will die along the way, and you've got a driverless car, so it's going to keep going to its destination
and deliver a corpse.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think even before that ever happens, a bunch of people are going to get a driverless car and like fuck on the highway.
Oh, for sure.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's probably already happened.
Well, but it's just humans will do so many strange things with driverless cars. I'm sure, like there will be people who will extend a line and do like not surfing, water skiing behind their car. I don't know. I think we're opening ourselves up to some great YouTube videos and some horrific accidents.
Oh, yeah. Well, and to Mike's point, I mean, think of how fucked that is, because it's not even like you could go out to a bar and drink. So it means you literally drank at home and then decided, hey, I'm already home safe, but fuck it, I'm going out.
The statistics bear out that most drunk driving tickets are given out within 2 miles of someone's home.
Wow. I just have to say, sorry, go ahead.
There's also this weird thing in Colorado where you don't have to have your keys in the ignition to get a DUI. You just have to be drunk and be around your car with the keys present somewhere.
Damn.
Wow.
So you could actually be in your home, and if you're within 25 feet of your car in your home, like if your bedroom butted up against your garage, technically you could get a DUI if your keys and you and the car were all within 25 feet.
That's ridiculous.
That's
Right?
a little bit extreme. I have really. Go ahead.
I've known people who have had multiple DUIs because they were homeless and addicted to alcohol, and they would be stopped by cops in their car because they lived out of their car. Right? They weren't driving; they were pulled out of the back seat, but because they were sleeping in the back seat of the car, they got the DUI.
If the engine is cold, you should not get a DUI.
So if those people can get a DUI, why would you not give a DUI to somebody in a driverless car?
I suppose, yeah.
The possibility of you just putting your hands on the driving on the steering wheel then gives control to you. You're that
Right.
close to controlling it. Why would you not give those people a DUI too?
That's an interesting point.
Well, I
I've
mean,
got
the law is often so delayed when it comes to catching up to technology. But like, I mean, I'm sure if we get, for example, like jacking in cyberpunk style, there's going to be so many laws that don't cover what you can do in cyberspace like that. I mean, I'm trying to remember. Yeah. It was like CDs and DVDs and all of that really got people to start rethinking copyright law. Because if you had to record something with a VHS tape, and even before VCRs existed, copyright violations of movies were probably pretty rare if they ever happened. So it took a long time for the law to catch up to the digital world.
So Josh has a comment in the chat. It says control of a vehicle is something that you need to have possible for a DUI, and that's true. But if driverless cars go to manual control as simply as cruise control would when you tap on the brake, if they can immediately go over to, your control, then they're not completely a dichotomous thing where it's your control or the computer's control.
Right. You could switch to it, yeah.
A driverless bus where you had like no option whatsoever, or say the tram, a light rail system where there is no driver whatsoever, I can understand you never getting a DUI on that. But if there's that possibility of you taking control, then
Plus,
it's always there.
Well, plus, what's to stop somebody getting pulled over and then saying, switching it over to, officer, I wasn't driving drunk, my car was driving.
I've heard of people pulling pranks like that, where they get stopped by a cop, and so everyone moves to the back seat, and they're like, "Well, I don't know what happened. No one was driving." It doesn't work. The cops are never amused, but
yeah, neither should they be amused. I got really strong feelings about drunk driving. When I was a young man, I was a volunteer fireman for the local fire department. And because we lived in a rural area, the fire department does everything. If there's a heart attack, we go to that. If there's a car wreck, they go to that. If there's someone drowns in the river, we go to that. So, or of course, if there's a fire, we go to that. And I've seen more people die or nearly dead than most people I know, considering I've never been in the military anyway. And some of the most gory things I've ever witnessed almost always involved someone who's been driving drunk. And I've seen people turned inside out and shit like that, shit that never leaves your brain when you see it. And so whenever I have a friend, and I've got several friends who just seem to think it's hilarious to drive 1.5 miles or 2 miles drunk, because my old roommate was one of them. In fact, he doesn't do it very often, but whenever he does it, he goes, the more practice you get, the better you are at it. I'm like, you motherfucker. It's so stupid. But he sells that line. And I know he's too smart to believe that, or not, because we all tell ourselves things. It's called denial. We all have these mechanisms that allow us to do things that we know we're not supposed to do. But from my point of view, there's never a good enough excuse to get behind the wheel of a car when you're inebriated. It makes me fucking furious.
I can think of one way it's acceptable, and that's when the car's a video game.
Yeah, that works.
I mean, I imagine that playing Grand Theft Auto drunk is actually fun.
It's probably funny to watch, but but yeah, actually, I was saying, Paul, because I didn't know you had been a firefighter. So knowing that, you're already one of my favorite people in the world, so that made you even more. I like you even more. But here's the other thing too, real back quick on the self-driving car. The other thing is that you think about that one car that got into the accident and killed somebody, and there have been other accidents, but that's the biggest one. That's a car that's owned by the company who makes it, who's maintaining it to the nth degree, because again, they want it to succeed. They want it to look good. Knowing how people take care of their cars, or rather don't, that's my big concern, because I just see even in industry, man. I don't know how many times I get calls where basically comes down to the customer did not take good care of their industrial system that costs tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, makes their product and could potentially be dangerous if it's not maintained properly. And they have way more money than the average person does, and they don't take care of their systems properly. So just imagine what Joe Schmo does. How many times you've been somebody whose car is an absolute wreck? Now just imagine that car is an absolute wreck and it's self-driving. No.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I'm just
Phoenix Writer. That joke is so old that Donald Trump is denying it Social Security.
It is a funny one though.
It is.
Hey, put it up there, Paul.
Well, I can't see it.
Very last one. Very last thing from Phoenix Writer.
What am I putting up?
The one from 717. It's the very last comment, dude.
817. We're in.
There it is. Okay, sorry. I had a brain fart. Yeah. I want to die like Grandpa, smiling in his sleep and not screaming like the passengers in his car. Yeah. I like that Robin Williams joke. He said everyone's got a time, but what if it's the pilot's time?
Yeah. I don't know, for some reason that reminds me of something that Terry Pratchett said, is that everything is edible. It's just that some things are only edible once.
Yeah, right. I like that.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I've never edited something. Like there's a lot of edible things, but I've never edited them.
Yeah. Well, the Stephen Wright had the joke, everywhere is within walking distance if you have enough time.
I mean, I would agree with that if we didn't have oceans.
Bering Strait, I suppose.
But yeah, man, Emo Phillips is freaking hilarious.
Emo Phillips, I don't even know who that is.
You'd probably recognize him if you saw him. He plays this sort of like tall, lanky, idiot man-child, and he has this sort of page boy haircut, and he speaks in a kind of sing-songy voice. He was in Weird Al's movie UHF. He played the shop teacher who cuts off his thumb, if that helps.
No, I never saw it.
Oh, you're so not my friend anymore. Go watch that.
I'm sorry.
Pioneered the non sequitur joke, where the first half of the sentence is the setup, but then the second half of the sentence just goes in a completely different direction.
There's a video of him doing that joke where he said, "When I was a child, I used to pray and pray for a bicycle, but I realized God doesn't work that way, so I stole one and asked him to forgive me." Yeah.
The redneck bumper sticker that says, "I really miss my wife, but my aim is improving." That's actually an Emo Phillips joke.
All right.
Well, do you guys remember Skeptical Heretic?
Who?
Yeah.
Skeptical Heretic.
So vaguely.
So he disappeared off YouTube. You know, his wife had a baby. He disappeared off YouTube for quite a long time. Last summer, Big Lundy did a hangout with him, and he was in the comments, and so he has a different channel name now, but that's similar. And I'm like, Skep, is that you? And he wrote back, yes. And I said, man, I've missed you. He goes, and he writes back, he goes, next time, aim better.
There, that's Emo Phillips.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Without Emo Phillips, there never would have been a Mitch Hedberg.
I can see that.
Yeah, he was funny. I like one of my favorites for his was the one about when you're at a restaurant and they call up a family and then no one comes, and then they after calling a couple of times they move on to the next group, and he's, well, what happened to those guys? He's like, Dufresne, party of 4. Dufresne, party of 4. Okay, Johnson, search party of 4. We got to define the Dufresnes.
Like a fantabulous double bill of stand-up comedians. I have to say, Emo Phillips and Stephen Wright. That would be an amazing show.
Mm.
I used to love Stephen Wright. My favorite joke from him, I can't do it as deadpan as him, but he goes, once I came back to my apartment and found out that all the furniture had been stolen and replaced with exact replicas.
Yeah. I think my favorite of his is curiosity killed the cat, but for a while I was a suspect.
Well, to finish the joke Paul was saying, he goes, and he goes, I went to my roommate and I said, what is this? Everything's been stolen and replaced with an exact replica. And he said, do I know you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a new tattoo. It's of myself, actual size.
Yeah.
I wish I had the guts to try stand-up comedy, but I don't, basically. Neither do I have the talent, so it pretty much falls down right there. But I wish I did.
Well, my sense of humor is so hit or miss. I don't know, like maybe it'd be different if people had shown up actually specifically to hear me making wisecracks rather than you poor fuckers who endure it whether you like it or not. I don't know. But like I say, some of my jokes land, some don't.
Well, you're the queen of puns, that's for sure.
I've been called the queen of the dad joke before as well.
My son's really funny, right? He's actually hilarious when he's not trying to be funny. And when he tries to tell jokes, they always fall flat.
Well, that's the thing, because the off-the-cuff humor is very different than a joke. The thing is, I've come to the conclusion that everybody in their lifetime probably says enough funny things that they could build like one set. The problem is there'd be a lot of out-of-date stuff, like Ayatollah Khomeini references and shit like that.
Yeah. I actually have been starting, I started this as a possible web comic and made about 33 comic strips of something called Head Meats, which is basically like just shit that goes through my head that I think people might think are funny. And I'm thinking instead about doing them, excuse me, as an animated series. But it's kind of, in a way, almost like stand-up comedy. Some of the like jokes and things like
what was that one you used to do? What was that one you used to do, Kate? Sorry, Kate. What was that one you used to do? Was that Head Meats?
No, it was called Weird Thoughts, but it's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
This one uses a character instead. But like it's got silly jokes like, okay, if a bicycle is a bike and a tricycle is a trike, then a unicycle is a yike and a motorcycle is a mic. A little silly shit like that. I don't know.
I think it works. Yeah.
But like I said, it's kind of like stand-up comedy, kind of. It's just there's no live audience and I don't have to do 1,000 jokes at once.
I know I've done stand-up. Kazoom's done stand-up. And Nick Bravo did stand-up.
Oh, Nick Bravo. Gee, go.
And the one who got the most booze was Nick Bravo.
I'm not surprised. He's also the one that got the most jail time.
I kind of did stand up once when I was MC I opened up a show at this hotel thing back when I was a DJ, and I had to entertain people for 15 minutes while the act that was supposed to come on was still getting ready. And so I just started joking about politics like we're doing right now until they finally came out and gave me the thumbs up. And it was extremely nerve-wracking, but thankfully people were in a good mood. And I don't think they thought I was going to be a comedian because I wasn't supposed to be. So the fact that I started cracking jokes, I think, caught everybody by surprise. I'm just lucky the atmosphere was good, Because if people are expecting you to tell jokes, I've been in comedy clubs sometimes, and the guy or girl who's up there is obviously a little too nervous. Whenever a comedian is too nervous, the audience is merciless, even if their jokes are funny. The audience can smell fear,
Yeah.
I think everybody who's a YouTuber has a little bit of an edge as far as stage fright. And me as a therapist, I also have to see a crowd of like 12 to 20 people sometimes regularly. So that stage fright component is gone. And I think that's why Kazoom was doing as well as he was doing at amateur nights shows where he was filming himself and putting it on his YouTube channel. There were others that were getting up there that the stage fright, you could tell it was just like eating away at their souls while they were there. And Kazoom goes up and he looks like a pro compared to them.
One thing I've noticed is talking in public has gotten a lot easier since I started my YouTube channel. If nothing else, I've tried my best to eliminate pregnant pauses, ums and uhs and you knows as much as I possibly can. It's not always easy when you have to speak off the cuff, but working on it. I remember not too long ago, I was taking the motorcycle safety course, and like there was classroom time and there was also field time. And during the classroom time, sometimes they'd say, okay, someone read aloud this passage out of the handbook. And everyone would sound like that droning school child kind of thing. And when it was my turn, I read it out like a freaking announcer, like I was doing a commercial or something. And, you know, that never would have happened without my YouTube career. Never.
Well, especially I know for myself, when I started making YouTube videos, I would go back and, you watch yourself, and I became aware of a lot of like nervous tics and different things I would do that one of the things I used to do a lot was I call it waving my head, because I was maybe nervous about looking into the camera. And so I was talking and I'd be doing this stuff. And then I was not aware of, but I'm watching and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I became aware of it, and that helped me work through it. And you're right, Kate, the same thing with me. I mean, I think probably when I noticed it the most was when I started doing like the charity, like Rob's Mayhem, charity thing, and also doing the MSF thing for DPR. Because I remember for the MSF thing, one of the times I interviewed somebody who worked who was like a nurse who had done missions for MSF. And afterward, there were people, and yeah, thing, I forget, probably 60 or 70 people were watching. And see, this is a little different. Like, yeah, we're on camera, but we're talking. It's friends talking. You can kind of ignore it, pretend the camera's not there, pretend that there's not an audience. But when you're broadcasting and you're live and you're it, you obviously you can't have pregnant pauses, you can't have dead air. Mm-hmm. And I remember afterward, some of the compliments I got, and I was like, wow, I've come a long way.
See, now, when I broadcast, when I'm by myself and I broadcast, I treat the chat as if it's a video chat like this. Mm. So, I mean, YouTube and the broadcast and none of it has helped me with public speaking at all. Wow. If I have to get in front of people live, I'm terrified. Camera, this is easy. To me, it's like a completely different thing.
To what Joe was saying about the nervous tics and all of that, I have had one or two people tell me, sit still while you're making your video. Part of why I waggle my head around is because I script my videos, and the script is on the other side of the camera, positioned more or less so I can see it. But sometimes I've written so much that it goes below the camera, and I have to try to look around it or shift somehow. But also, if I start waggling my head a lot, what's going on is I've spoken longer than I have breath, and I'm trying to get it all out, like finish the sentence before I take another breath. But it's difficult, so waggle, waggle, waggle to compensate.
Right.
I think Kate's pretty good at hiding script reading. A lot of people have different techniques for trying to hide it, but I think she does pretty good at hers.
Aw, shucks.
Rob, when I look at Peach's older videos, I can tell where her script is, right? But she's semi-okay at trying to hide that it's a script. But just the preparedness of it gives it away as well. Mm. But the person who I think is the worst is actually Pat Condell. You can see his script in the reflection of his eyes.
Yeah.
He's got glasses on. And just looking at the way that he's moving his head, it's like, why? Why even try, dude? But the technique that I learned that keeps that to a minimum for me, I learned from Aldous Valor. And he used to have a whiteboard in front of him, and he would put bullet points don't put the entire sentence. Just put the topic of what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And he was going so fluently, so smoothly, and he was able to be a lot more energetic when he was talking. So I went away from scripting totally and just went to bullet points. It helped me a lot.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's funny because I had an off the cuff conversation with he's a friend. He's also my friend Tony's son. He was working for me as an intern and staying here at my house. And I forget what the topic was, but I talked about 30 minutes about the topic I was going to be doing the video on. And I'm just smooth and I'm just being myself and everything's cool. And then I go to do video. I'm like, and he's like, and so he's sitting there watching me. He's like, so I cut for a second. And he's like, dude, you just talked eloquently about this for 30 minutes. And now you can't get 30 seconds out, straight. It took a while to be able to do it. And now I'm still not great at it, but I'm better. But going to bullet points helped a ton.
I also feel very confident in front of cameras, far more than I am in front of live people, partly because with a camera, I have the luxury of a second take, which kills the stage fright, which means I screw up less. That's one of the reasons why if I ever got into acting, I would never want to do it on a stage, because I would have to get everything right the first time and all the way through. And I've never even done that with one of my videos. Even my blooper-free videos have had me stopping, editing, and then filming again. So I could never do a play like that. It would just be counter to every instinct I have for being on display like that. But a camera, no worries.
I can't remember which comedian it was. But because there's several comedians that work with props and maybe have little signs or whatever. And I can't remember who it was, but I remember seeing the comedian say that the reason why they started working with props with stuff written on it was effectively that was a way to have bullet points and not have it obvious that that's what they were doing. So they worked that into their act so they wouldn't forget.
When I first started making videos on my channel, I tried making scripted videos because when I very first started making videos, I thought, I'd like to be like Pat Condell, except nicer. That was kind of like my first impression. That was my earlier video experiences on YouTube Atheist Community. But I quickly ditched scripts because I'm just not like when I was a DJ on the radio, you never speak for more than 10 or 15 seconds at a time. And anybody can do that without humming and hawing. But if you're going to do an 8 or 9 minute video and you want to do the whole thing in one go without any editing, which is what I sort of prefer, what I ended up doing was people used to compliment me all the time. How did you get that whole speech out? It's so eloquent. You did it in one take. I'm like, yeah, but that was take 15. You know what I mean? So, or whatever.
Well, one of the things I started doing, because I had the same problem, and the problem what I was having for me was that by the 14th or 15th time, it came out more smoothly, but it didn't come out natural. It didn't seem like here I'm having a conversational style. It was very clear that I had rehearsed this like 15 times and it was stiff. And so what I started doing instead was I'm going to talk off the cuff and say what I have to say without cutting. And I'll do that. And then sometimes I'll think, I could have said this better. I'll go back and then basically redo it several times, but even that same style, and then cut the pieces together that I like the best. Because certain times, like I remember once I thought of this really cool line to say, and then I did a run through and I left out the line, like, oh shit, and I couldn't think of a way to insert it. So I had to like do it again and then cut the bits because it was too good of a line to lose.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I script everything, and I script it pretty tightly too, is just because if I come up with a clever turn of phrase, I don't want to lose it. And it's happened a few times where I'm like, wow, I managed to impress my own darn self. Let's hope the audience feels so too. So yeah, I mean, I try to recite my scripts absolutely verbatim, and it works for me. I've seen other people do other styles. Like when I did a collab with Surus, he loves to do everything just plain off the cuff. He might do 1 or 2 takes, but he doesn't write anything when he does it. And I think I did not put in my best, I hesitate to call it performance, let's just say work, when I did that collaboration with him, because I didn't script a damn thing and kind of felt lost, So Yeah, I'm not super proud of that collab right there. Not because of anything Surus did or didn't do, but just the style was not my own.
Yeah. Well, one thing I started putting those terms of phrases. I started putting those in the bullet points.
I don't script. Well, I don't want to say don't because I don't make videos anymore. I didn't script any of my videos. I couldn't because me reading a script sounds like I'm reading a script. It would be like, do you know who I am? I am Dev Shell 2, motherfucker. So all my videos were something I was passionate about that I felt like I could just let go. And then I would go back and take out all the spaces.
Mm.
So,
My observation is the worst person at doing a video in one take is Philip DeFranco. If you look at any of his videos, there are so many jump cuts where you can tell that he's got a deadline every day, and he's just stitching it together because he cannot go more than 30 seconds without a flub.
Hey, Rob, you know,
Well,
one thing.
it's kind of my own videos, actually.
Well, Rob, what you said reminded me of when Clinton was in office. I could always, because people always talked about how he was dishonest, and he could be, but I could always tell when Bill Clinton was telling the truth and when he wasn't. Because when he was speaking about something and he was telling the truth, he was passionate about it and he could just go. And when he was basically full of crap, he sounded like he was reading off a script.
Yeah, I chose my material on YouTube carefully. If I didn't care enough about it to be able to just, just spew whatever it is I wanted to say, then I didn't really make the video because, if it's not authentic, it comes through, it shows.
Right.
So, and since my script reading would not be natural at all, it just isn't worth it to try to make the video.
Well, right, because otherwise then you're doing the exact same thing that everybody else is doing, in which case, why bother?
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, one of the things that held me back was part of that, because there was times I wanted to say something, and if I didn't get to it right away, by the time I would, if I didn't have a different take on it than everybody else, then I was just pissing in the wind. And it's kind of sucks that there was times where if I had put the video out right away, I would have been ahead of the wave. But then now I'm just look like I'm just copying off of everybody else, and there's no point in doing that.
There have been a few times when I either unknowingly responded to the same video as someone else, or I totally knew, but I thought that they had gotten it wrong somehow. I have had some compliments, people saying, you did it better than that other one over there. And so I'm pleased at that. Mind you, I should probably surf to their videos and see how many people say, yeah, Bionic Dance did this one, but you were better. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, like you talk about spewing the same thing as everybody else. I mean, it's hard not to. Being an online atheist, a YouTube atheist, there isn't a whole lot to say that hasn't been said before, especially since the theists keep not coming up with new arguments for their own shit.
That's certainly true. I do remember back in especially 2009, how, like you're saying, we had this sort of situation where there was one or maybe three or four sort of prominent dickish religious folks making very provocative videos like the Woods of Jordan or Gear Up or obviously VFX and people like that.
Shock of God.
Yeah, Shock of God. God, there's a good one. And so when we had that gaggle of jerks to respond to, it was inevitable that we're all going to be making videos to the same group of people. But I kind of picked mine. I picked the Woods of Jordan. I picked never to do Venom Fang X, and I never did a Venom Fang X video just as a point of pride. But I stopped doing videos to the Woods of Jordan because my son, who's only 3 or 4 years younger than Jordan, said, Dad, I think you're picking on Jordan. And I'm like, well, if you think that, then maybe Jordan thinks that. And I always thought of Jordan as an adult because he was 19 when I started making videos to him. And as far as I'm concerned, when you're 19, you're adult. That's it. You're end of story. I don't debate it. We're equal.
Right.
But It is also true that Jordan was less mature and didn't really have his arguments very well thought out, and maybe it wasn't that there was a little disparity there between where I was coming from and where he was coming from. And I think it was, like I say, if my son's a pretty sensitive guy, and if he says that, I'm just going to take his word for it. You know what I mean? So I stopped making.
I mean, I have to say, I liked Venom Fang X because he was hilariously funny. You know, I miss him being on YouTube just because it was so much fun to watch him be that stupid. There was that sort of Schadenfreude, whatever the frick, like just sort of watching a car crash in slow motion quality about his videos. And I miss that. I really do.
It's because he was unnaturally smug. I mean, I'm smug in general, but Venom Fang X, it was... Yeah, I mean, he makes Sean Hannity look humble. All right, that was Venom Fang X.
Well, and to your point, Kate, about responding to what somebody else did. See, that's what the stuff I like to do. If I could see somebody discuss a topic and say, "Well, yes, but," or, you know, and maybe point out something that they didn't bring up, or maybe where I disagree with them, because then at least I was adding something new to the conversation.
Talking about Venom Fang X, this popped into my head. I had to.
Well, you know, one thing about Venom Fang X, one video he did that I liked, even though, again, he was being, you know, massively foolish and all that. When he made his video to Thunderfoot where he did the Joker thing, I gotta tell you, you know, okay, look, he was an idiot, he didn't know what he was talking about, but the video was a good video.
Yeah, his Joker was fantastic.
The Joker was fantastic. And the way he wove in, at the time, I hadn't seen The Dark Knight, so I wasn't familiar. So now, having seen Dark Knight several times, when I watched that video and see how he wove in certain lines from the Joker from the movie, I go, oh, yeah, that's pretty creative. Well done.
But you have to admit, it kind of looked like he actually snapped his cap when he made that video. I mean, he looked literally insane for like 5 minutes. It was such an impressive Heath Ledger imitation because Heath Ledger snapped his cap, didn't he, when he went and played the Joker? So
absolutely.
He was trying so hard, though, that it to me it came off like pathetic fanboy. You know, it like maybe he did the Joker really well, but he seemed like he was trying too hard to be that guy.
Well, but it was still something fun about it. And there were some people, again, who maybe didn't see Dark Knight and were like, dude, he was off his nut. And then when you realize, like, you're right, Paul, he totally seems like he's off his nut while he's doing that. And then when he stops and he talks more like business-like and everything like that, and you realize, okay, no, he's not actually a nut. He's just dumb and doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
So are we operating under the assumption that even when he's not the Joker, he's a sane? Is that our premise?
I don't think he's mentally ill. I think he's just a fucking moron.
Okay.
He's mentally ill, all right.
Yeah, he's Venom Fang X, a talented guy. If he can, you know, I have no idea what he's doing these days, but if he can find a path that doesn't involve, you know, ripping off kids hospitals, he'd be pretty successful. I mean, he's smart. He's talented. He's got a flair. Yeah.
And
last I heard, he had joined forces with Ray Comfort and was like working with him somehow. But that was what, 7 years ago?
He was actually
10 years ago.
He actually came down here to New Jersey. I almost went to meet him because he was like doing street preacher stuff on the boardwalk, and I ended up in a Skype call with him, and you know, it was interesting because again, he was doing the presuppositionalist stuff. Like it was right around the time Psi 10 popped up, and but you're right. To Rob's point, here's the funny thing: someone can be intelligent and still be a fucking moron. They're not mutually exclusive. And I kind of feel about him the same way I feel about hackers who are destructive. You know, some people who write virus code and send viruses out into the world, computer viruses out in the world. It's like, you obviously had to know something to create this. If you had just used your powers for good rather than evil, just imagine what you could have accomplished.
Well, that's what Anonymous is supposed to be, isn't it?
Supposed to be.
Yeah, supposed to be. Yeah. Well, that went down with a thud. Sorry, Joe.
Not at all. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, like I said before, my disappointment with them is okay. Like they hacked, terrorist websites and made kind of made fun of them on their own websites. I'm like, yeah, how about figure out where the fuck they are and like let everybody, all the governments of the world know that, so we can round these fuckers up and they'll stop, committing acts of terror, not just, oh, we got over on them. Like, no, or better yet, get their money and like secure their money away from them so they can't use it to buy bomb making material, something like that. That I'd be totally behind that. But they just said, oh, we hacked their Twitter account. Woo. Okay.
Would you really be totally behind that, Joe? Would you really, if they were like benevolently going around and like stealing billionaires' fortunes and hiding it? Would you really be behind that?
Thank you, Kirk Cameron.
I'm talking specifically about terrorists. So if we're talking like Al Qaeda and things like that.
All right. Okay. Right.
Hey, look, if they could have got it and then stolen Al Qaeda's money and gave it to poor people and kept Al Qaeda from doing blowing people up, I would have been totally behind that.
Except the president now wants to declare Antifa as a terrorist organization.
Right.
And nobody is Antifa, and he's just going to label whoever he wants to steal the money from.
Thing is, terrorism and terrorist are words that have gotten, I'll say, muddied over the last decade or three, because part of terrorism inherent to it is like blackmail. Do what we say or there'll be more of this violence.
Or else, yeah.
And a lot of the people that are being accused of being terrorists right now don't have that. Like, I'm not sure if I've ever actually heard demands from the KKK, and I don't think I've heard them as, or else there'll be more lynchings, right? So technically, in the legal pedantic definition, they're not terrorists. They're really bad people, but they don't tick enough of the boxes to be terrorists.
You don't actually have to
doesn't even come close.
You don't actually have to enunciate a purpose when the purpose is simply intimidation. Like, so basically the idea that we're going to lynch somebody to let you know, basically, if it's like, okay, a black business owner, we hung the black business owner guy. Well, it's basically the implied message that, hey, you were getting a little too uppity, or you were getting too successful, and we're not having any of that.
That's still not enough to qualify under the strict legal definition.
Well, as far I could be wrong, but I thought the strict legal definition doesn't necessarily, with respect, Kate, doesn't necessarily imply that there's going to be consequences, because I can almost recite it. The terrorist is someone who uses violence or the threat of violence to achieve a social, political, or religious goal.
Right.
So the threat of violence isn't even necessarily violence. So you don't have to kill anybody. You don't have to have a demand. You don't have to have conditions. What you do have to have is the goal of fear, the goal of intimidation, fear, or destruction. It can be as simple as that. Because if you know that you're never, like say, I mean, it is terrorism to say, for example, take someone for hostage and then say, you're not getting this person back unless, or we're not going to stop. Or like when the IRA was doing the bombing in the UK, they kept on doing it until they're basically saying either you're going to negotiate with us or we're going to keep bombing.
Well, here's the thing. I'm looking at the FBI website right now, and I'm looking at their definition of domestic terrorism, which is violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature.
Yeah.
So, but it does say they have to be violent criminal acts into like specifically to further ideological goals.
Right.
Just hanging black people doesn't like move them forward on. It doesn't.
But it does though. The whole point is, like I said, if you hang a black leader, it carries the implied threat that this person is getting too uppity, and that's absolutely.
See, that's the problem, though. It's only an implied threat.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure you have to declare it.
It didn't say in that definition you just read, Kate. It said nothing about declarations at all.
Well, but it does say furthering a political, or sorry, furthering an ideological goal. If
Yeah,
there's no defined, like this is how what we just did furthers our goal, if that's not like readily apparent, they don't.
Okay. May I? What if the goal is to make people afraid? What if that is the goal?
Well, I'll give you a good. I'll give a specific example. So there, you probably, most of it here probably know about the four civil rights people that were killed. They were basically doing voter registration. It was 2 black people and two Jews from New York, and they were killed. The goal was to stop black people from voting. So if we kill the people who go around registering, one, it scares people from even trying to register, to get people registered, and it also scares the people who would register. That was the goal. The goal was to prevent black people from building political power. They didn't have to make it.
They wouldn't have to make it known, though, that they were doing this because that person was registered.
But they didn't have to put a manifesto for people to understand that.
Sorry, you broke up there a sec. What did you say?
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just saying. Well, no, go ahead, Rob. You can say the thing that I was going to say.
The act itself makes it known.
Right.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because an act of violence could just be a single act of violence.
It's all
Right.
about,
But it's still terrorism.
Is it?
Even-
How?
Well, I mean, because it causes terror, Kate.
No, that's
That-
not good enough. That's not
No.
good enough under the legal definition. Just making people afraid isn't enough to be
You're
a terrorist.
interpreting the definition incorrectly, is what I'm telling you. Because
Well,
again,
how do we know you're not?
well, because okay, legal scholars agree with me that that's what the purpose was. There you go.
Okay, I mean, I just read it off the FBI website. If you've got references for us to prove that, please trot it out.
Because they were trying. The whole point was they were going to be tried based on civil rights violations, and so that's the whole point. Because basically they're trying to deny black people their right to vote. So it was understood by everybody who actually understand who matters.
Well, see, that's the problem, though, is, it was understood by everybody isn't something you can demonstrate or prove in like a court of law. Like, everyone just, I mean, you're basically saying, well, we assumed it, therefore it's true.
Okay, but that's exactly how people in the criminal underworld work. Things aren't necessarily explicit. You know, we all know how things are. Like, for example, like I say, if it's known that I'm about to roll over on Jimmy Two-Tone, right? I'm going to go to court and testify against Jimmy Two-Tone, and someone knocks me off. I get hit by a bus, right? Whether I actually got hit by a bus or not, people are going to believe that you better not roll over on Jimmy Two-Tone because Paul got hit by a bus. You know what I mean?
But how is that not an assumption?
It is an assumption, but
But that's
point
my
is,
point.
the
An
point
assumption
is,
is not
the
good
point is,
enough.
my point is to make people make that assumption is instilling fear. To give people an assumption to make is giving them fear.
Right.
I think
Creating the assumption.
leeway to that. I don't think that is. I mean, I'm not convinced by that. I'm really not.
Fair enough.
Creating the assumption that something bad or some kind of violence will happen is using a threat of violence.
Not necessarily, because if that was never intended, if it was never, we're trying to coerce these people rather than, wow, we found a guy, let's just do something to him, then, I think intentions do matter. If people are scared of it, that's not necessarily like deliberately the act of the people committing the crime.
Well, look up murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwimmer, and get back to us. Find some information on that particular case.
I would like to make it.
I don't know those names, and you would have to say them again. So,
sorry, I would like to make an observation, though. I mean, in the case of September 11th, assuming that we just completely accept the official story about everything, Osama bin Laden was quoted after the fact saying that the goal of the attack was to get the United States military out of the sovereign kingdom of Saudi Arabia, because when we put them there after the war against Kuwait to protect them against Iraq, who was still belligerent at the time, and they felt it was an insult on the dignity of the kingdom. And so the goal of September 11th was to get the United States out of Saudi Arabia. And coincidentally, 9 months later, we were out of Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Well,
So I'm telling you that September 11th worked. I'm telling you that we gave them what they wanted.
But here's the thing, though. They had to tell us what they wanted.
Okay.
That's the difference. You just said yourself that Saddam Hussein issued the threat of more of this.
Not Saddam Hussein, but Saddam Hussein was still belligerent towards Saudi Arabia. That was what I was saying.
The people were actively saying, if you don't do what we say, there will be more of what you just saw. That's what made it terrorism.
He said it after the fact.
What if he said it after the fact? He doesn't have to say it before the act happened, or it might be prevented. But he did say it. It was explicitly stated. Okay. Doesn't matter when.
Hezbollah does not put out a communique every time that they blow up a school bus full of children.
So?
But we know what their purpose is.
Because at some point they've stated it. It doesn't have to be individually. Every last one of them is declared as a terrorist act. But they do have to say, I mean, if they say, do what we say, or there's more violence, and then they keep doing more violence as long as people don't do what they say, yes, we know what they were up to. But if people don't explicitly state, we're doing these lynchings specifically doing
the Black manifesto, and has had one for years.
Okay.
So,
see, I'm actually on the same page as you are, Kate, as regards there's a danger that the definition gets drawn out too broadly. And like every time there's a mass shooting, for example, there's some people who say it's terrorism. Yes and no. I mean, and I think where you're making the distinction, Kate, is very relevant when it comes to mass shootings. Because if someone goes into, like, say, the Aurora Theater and shoots 50 people at a Batman cinema, was that, how many years ago was that, Michael? About 5-6 years ago? I don't know. Yeah.
9.
Wow, that long ago. Okay, but you know, the guy shot up a theater for no particular goal, as far as I could tell. So that I would class that as a mass shooting and not an act of terrorism. But there are plenty of people at the time saying that was terrorism. Plenty of people.
Well, and
so I think I agree with you, Kate, that you shouldn't class things like that as terrorism, even though there was a huge death toll, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not about how many people you kill. It's about whether or not there's some sort of goal. I get that, but you don't have to necessarily state your goal as an or else. Like, or else I'm going to keep doing this. You could just make your terrorism could just be a swan song. You know, a suicide bomber is only going to make one statement.
Yeah, but if he doesn't actually make a statement, it's as nebulous as a mass shooting. Like if he doesn't leave behind a manifesto, if he doesn't leave behind a clear goal that his suicide bombing was supposed to accomplish, then we're left with a mystery, not a terrorist.
Okay, well, that's an excellent point. So if you do leave a manifesto, like, say, Elliot, whatever his name was, Elliot Rodger, who killed like 6 or 7 people, was Elliot Rodger a terrorist or was he a mass murderer? Because he did have a manifesto. He was the biggest misogynist I've ever personally heard of.
Well, was he doing it to try to affect change in some fashion?
He was doing it to prove a point that women were evil, yeah.
That isn't working towards a goal. That's just making a statement. This is not enough.
Listen, this is why I'm asking you, because he did have a manifesto. He did have his goals, but was he a mass murderer or terrorist?
Hold on, but you said he did have his goals. What were they?
His goal was to teach women the lesson about how they're, he was the biggest incel anyone's ever heard of. I mean, if you ever read that manifesto, it's enough to chill your blood, right? And so he had definite goals. But what I'm asking you is, would you personally put him in a category of mass murderer or terrorist? Because I'm
trying to extract from you some very specific information that I need to make that judgment, and it seems to be going sideways every time I ask the question.
That's my fault. Sorry.
Okay. What were his goals for the what were his intended goals as the result of his killing? Like, what did he expect to have happen as a result of it?
Awareness of the manifesto?
What?
Awareness of the manifesto.
That's it?
And dead people.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then I would not class that as a terrorist act.
Okay.
Agreed.
Now, the thing is, though, Paul, you said that his thing was to teach women a lesson. So if the idea was to terrorize women to see that, hey, if you treat men the way he thought that he was being treated, that this is the result.
Unabomber.
But the thing is, I mean, if I'm assuming the guy was either caught or killed or something, yes?
Oh, he killed himself. Yeah.
Okay, well, if he killed himself, then where's the threat anymore? You know, I mean, at least when you have a suicide bomber, usually they are backed by somebody. And
Well, there is no threat anymore. But if in fact his goal was to get his manifesto widely circulated, it was successful.
Well, and also
part of the definition of terrorism is not just I want attention. It's I intend this act to bring about some sort of change.
Right. But here's one thing that could be, Kate, is that because people in that community, there are people who are inspired. There's, for instance, there's people who worship the Columbine people, and there are people who kids who've been stopped before the act who basically wanted to emulate them. So
not good enough. Not good enough. According to the definition, it has to be coercive.
I'm trying.
These people are doing it willingly.
Well, no. The thing is, if your goal is to inspire others to do likewise, you say, "Hey, men, women are treating us like shit, and I'm going to go take out a bunch of them, and isn't this grand? This is something we should do." And others do that. Yeah, then that is to further a goal, whether it's achievable goal or not, and it is to scare people and to basically scare women.
The goal is not about inspiring people. It's very specific. It says that you have to be coercing or intimidating, not inspiring. That's not part of the definition.
Intimidating women and inspiring men. There's
inspiring is not there. There is no inspiring in the definition of terrorism.
But it's not mutually exclusive, though, Kate. You can do both things in an act.
Okay, but you moved from he inspired people now to intimidating women. And my point is that you're saying, oh, he inspired copycats. I'm saying that's not good enough.
Well, you're wrong, Kate. You're wrong. That's my whole point. Is that you're saying,
on my side, buddy.
Kate, now it's my turn to say something.
No. You don't get to say, oh, you're wrong, and then just say, and then I get to keep blathering.
I'm trying to explain to you why you're wrong, but you won't shut up.
Well, but that's because every time I say, look at this point here, I've got the law right in front of me, you just go, it doesn't matter.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying your interpretation of the law is wrong, Kate. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. But I
don't care, frankly, about your interpretation. I mean, because I've got the words right here in front of me, and none of them say what you're saying. Not one.
They certainly don't say what you're saying, the way you're interpreting it either.
Okay, if you say so.
All right, well, let's get a lawyer sometime, and we'll see what the lawyer says, because a lawyer's opinion will be better than either yours or mine. Do you agree?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Paul, we need a lawyer.
But all right, I mean, I think the problem is obviously a difference between letter and spirit, and I don't agree with your assessment of the spirit.
And I don't agree with your interpretation of the letter. So I'm going to see if I can.
There you go.
I'll see if I can rope Prophet into this sometime, because he's a lawyer.
Prophet isn't Prophet of Zod?
No, Prophet MTH.
Oh, Prof. I heard Prophet. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Good old Prof MTH. He had his birthday last week, didn't I? I missed that guy.
Yeah, I haven't seen him around much.
Yeah, he hasn't made video for like 5 years or 10 years, maybe even.
I'm not even sure if I'm still subbed to him. I must be, but I don't know.
Well, anyway, let's go on another topic so Kate and I stop hating.
In fact, we need to start wrapping the conversation up because it's over 3 hours now, and I have other things to pay attention to. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Say no more.
And I am starting to lose my voice. You can probably notice.
But yeah. Anyway, yeah. It's always fun when things get a little heated, but I hope it didn't get too rough for y'all. You know, yeah, because I love my people. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight, and I want to thank the audience out there for their comments and everything. Is there any sort of final topic that you wish we talked about that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
Jeez.
I just want to say that I am glad we didn't talk about Trump.
Yeah, a whole show with no Trump talk.
Okay.
Did we talk about Trump?
Minimal.
Well, we talked about Space Force.
Oh, Space Force. Yeah, a little bit about Trump. Yeah.
Maybe
But
enough.
yeah, we didn't talk about the man himself, thank goodness. And yeah, it's especially good today because all over the TV, he's just been like, yeah, disastrously smug and terrible. Anyway, so let's not go down that road. Again, thanks to everybody in the audience, and thank you guys as well. And I'm going to end the broadcast now. We'll see you again next week on the Breakfast Club. Cheers, everybody.
Fun. Don't get burned alive.